important. Will, I didn't bring your gavel. Do you need it?
I can use my
Want me to go upstairs and get it?
No, I think it's okay.
I've got a hard head.
Headbutt the table. Hope this stuff isn't good.
So where are you guys out of?
Sacramento.
Sacramento. A long ways.
It's been a long day. I think we opened the airport when we took off.
TSA not opened yet.
When security's closed, you know you're early.
So is that it?
Yeah, so
One more.
AJ said his shift ends at 6, so he might be a couple minutes late. You guys, I think you're welcome to get started. Can call me to order?
Sure. Officially call this special meeting of the Planning Commission to order.
All right, I'll call roll. Print out roll sheet. We'll just go down the line. Mr. Shaneline?
Here?
Ms. Ringenty?
Here.
Mr. Cash?
Here.
Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
Ms. Griffith?
Here.
And Mr. Parsons?
Here. Do we have a flag present? Shall
I
we-
thought there was one.
Is that
Still.
Sure. It doesn't, I think you should. All right. You stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so item 1 for us tonight is our study session for the Middletown Development Code update. Thank you to our consultants who have made the long trek here to be with us. And I believe I speak for all committee members present to say we're excited and eager to hear from you this evening.
Here. Okay. Well, it's good to meet all of you. Some of you repeats, but a lot of new faces. So what we plan to do this evening is to give an overview of the project, just a snapshot, so we're all on the same page as we start to move through the provisions. And then we'll walk through what's been completed so far, and then get into the administrative provisions portion. Our plan is to walk through all of the track change edits, through more key summary or key highlights. And then there's discussion questions we have for the commission to talk through. And we hope to get resolution or at least some consensus on direction that then we can work with city staff to revise the document to move it forward. At the end of the presentation, we'll outline next steps. So you're all aware of your role as a planning commission, what next items you'll be reviewing as we work into summer of next year. So we'll start to chart those out. I will note that the dates shown are still tentative. We're working with staff, so don't look at the calendar and go, oh no. This is just, we're trying to target this in order to get it done by adoption of fall of 2026. So just to introduce, my name is Brent Gibbons. I'm a principal and co-owner of Gibbons Planning Group, along with Michael Gibbons here, my other half, my brother. The two of us run a consulting firm that focuses on land use development regulations, development codes, comprehensive plans here, general plans back in California. And we work with communities all over the country on trying to streamline development and move projects forward, cutting the red tape. So as part of this effort, we're working with Middletown on a update to the development code, but this is a technical update. So back in 2018, the city went through a comprehensive update, whole reorganization and realignment of provisions, uses, and permits. But in 2022, the comprehensive plan was updated, but that came after the development code. So what we're working with the city now is to bring the development code in conformance with the vision and the policies that were laid forth in the comprehensive plan adopted by council, and then find other areas that maybe are not so clear within the regulations and require some updating. It's been a number of years since the comprehensive update, and staff has started to compile a list of things that maybe aren't working quite well, seemed good in theory at the time, and this is the opportunity to revisit those. And also sometimes just get a third-party perspective on regulations and bring forth some options for the city and the planning commission and eventually the council to consider as part of it. So it's a 6-phase project. Phase 1 and phase 2 are complete. That's more of our, that's our project initiation. We had our meeting with, a kickoff meeting with city staff. We had a meeting with the city council, walked through the purpose and expectations of the project, asked them to weigh in. Part of phase 2 focused on an evaluation of existing city documents. So the development code has a lot of cross-referencing to other planning documents and non-planning documents that the city has. We want to make sure that they're consistent throughout. You don't want any conflicts between these provisions. Phase 3 is our understanding engagement. We're close to wrapping phase 3 up, and I'll walk through the different components of the engagement that's been completed thus far. And now we're also in the middle of phase 4, which is the actual drafting of the development code itself. So some of the engagement that's been completed so far, we did a community workshop. This was last month, so the beginning of October. This was publicized for 30+ days. Received a handful of interested individuals. I would say development code is not always the most fascinating topic that drives people out. But we did have, I think, good feedback and good conversation that came out of that. As part of the community workshop, we created a development code survey that we handed out as part of that meeting. And what you learn as part of these meetings is sometimes things need to be ironed out a bit more, and we had some good discussion with those who attended, made some changes to the survey that evening, and then rolled out a revamped one based on public feedback at the workshop. And that survey has been live since the beginning of October, and will run through November 21st, so later this month. I think the big thing about this too is the survey originally was in a hard copy format. We've digitized it so it's more easily accessible, and then we updated some of these questions. As of today, we've received 140 surveys back. That's does not include the surveys that were handed in during the community workshop. I will say the feedback has been fantastic. Doing this for a living, not every community is so forthcoming when it comes to things you like, don't like, and want changed. But some of these items I don't think the planning commission is going to be shocked to hear as part of this effort. But I do think that there are some really interesting concepts that were brought up. And what we'll end up doing is once that window closes on the 21st, we'll summarize all of that feedback, provide a summary report to city staff, planning commission will get a copy of it, council will get a copy of it, and that'll help guide the process moving forward. And then now we're currently in the midst of stakeholder interviews. So we worked with the city to identify, I believe, 15 stakeholders. And as part of this, we like to have candid conversations with individuals who use the code or are familiar with it. Those stakeholder interviews are just Michael and I and that person. Most people will talk more freely if there's not a representative from the city available or part of that meeting. And we really just want to get down to brass tacks. What do you think works? What do you think don't work? What other communities are good models, what aren't? And how do the standards reflect current development regulations, market trends, uses? Are there things with the code that are great? And we've actually heard some things that have come out of it saying that some of the processes are good, the timelines are good. So these stakeholder interviews are currently ongoing. We've completed 5 of them so far.
What kind of categories are you using? Who are the stakeholders? Not individuals, but
Sure.
group what they
Name
are.
them right.
You can give me every name.
So builders, developers,
Okay.
recent applicants,
Mhm.
board commission members,
Okay.
Business owners.
business owners, long-term residents, prior city employees, cast a pretty wide net.
Okay.
And I will say that as part of the engagement report summary that we'll put together, we'll list everybody we talked to, but the comments aren't gonna be contributed to stakeholder one or
No,
stakeholder
I
two.
wouldn't expect it.
Yeah, so they'll be overall generalized, but the feedback received at the stakeholder interview so far, again, has been fantastic. Probably 5 or 6 pages of just notes per, lots of good feedback, that I think will really help the process and really help drive the administrative provision edits that are in front of you tonight. We plan to wrap the stakeholder interviews up before Thanksgiving, so they'll be folded into an overall engagement effort. As it relates to remaining engagement, at this point, after the stakeholder interviews, the engagement from the public perspective, besides study sessions with the commission, will go quiet. And that's to wait until we get the entire code put together. And then during that quiet period is when we're working with you, the commission, to vet each of these different parts of the development code. We plan to bring the entire code out to a community workshop in June of next year. And then there'll be 4 local interest group presentations that we'll be making. Those interest groups are still yet to be determined. We'll work with city staff on that. And then after that process, once we gather all the feedback after the full code is out, we're gonna bring all of that feedback to you, the planning commission, bring it back. And then you will then at that meeting start to provide formal recommendations on what should be incorporated and then how that should move its way up to city council.
And are you comparing our development code with our neighboring towns?
To some degree, depending on the topic.
Yep.
As we'll go through, there have been some topics that city staff has explicitly asked us to look at in reference to some surrounding jurisdictions, development standards, fees. Also taking a look at some of the comprehensive plans that are in the surrounding area, we've also taken a gander at. The idea though isn't to just copy and paste from other jurisdictions, we really want to craft something that's gonna be.
Some of our neighbors seem to be ahead of us on development,
Mhm.
and I'd be interested in knowing if this is part of the reason.
The development code, at least through stakeholder interviews, has, that's been the topic that's holding back development and holding back, in some respects, how some communities, you mentioned, are maybe advancing or a little bit further. The development code is one of the biggest barriers, and we're hearing that repeatedly. So we're documenting what the stakeholders believe those barriers are, how to overcome those, and that's what we'll present back in the summary report for consideration.
Yeah, I've been hearing some of that for the last 12 years.
That's what I'm saying, I don't think any of this stuff is gonna be new to any of you. But it may reinforce the discussion and the evaluation of some of your standards and whether they are right. And whether it matches where development and best practices are going. I could say just from the outside perspective coming in, reading some of the administrative processes, some of them are a bit clunky, and we could see where things can get bottlenecked and held up, and that's our job, is to look at that, evaluate, and then bring forth options to consider how maybe we can streamline it to move things forward.
Okay.
Are there any questions on the actual process of the update itself? I will say that tonight we're gonna go over the administrative provisions. The next 2 chunks that the planning commission will look at will be the zoning districts. So those are each of the zoning districts within the city, the allowable uses and the permits that are applied to those uses. And then the third piece, which you will see in, I believe, April, the spring timeframe, is what's known as the general development standards and specific development standards. So that's your parking, your signs, landscaping, fencing, all that fun stuff. That'll all come at the end. So those are the 3 big pieces of drafting the code, and that's just what to expect moving forward.
But tonight, we are really focused on the administrative provisions. I believe those were sent out to the commission for your review. What I plan on doing is highlighting some of the major changes, not major, but main changes in that document. And then we have a series of questions, targeted questions that, while we were drafting and working with your city staff, came up. Process efficiencies, maybe different review authorities that we hope to cover and receive some direction. So Brett mentioned 3 phases we find this is a bite-sized, more approachable way to go about a development code, especially when we are engaging with the Planning Commission in these study sessions, bring it piece by piece. We like to start with the admin provisions because the administrative provisions are almost the how-to manual for your development code. Who are your development review authorities? How does your Planning Commission work? What are their roles? How does the BZA work? What is your conditional, or your use permits? What are your certificate of occupancy? So we've gone all through that. We want those to be clear, refined, before we then start implementing those in different land uses. Because if our administrative foundation isn't good, then it's gonna create more work for us in the updating in the future. So think of the administrative provisions again as the how to enforce your code and your provisions. It's really broken up into 4 chapters. 1202, which is your general provisions. 1224 handles your non-conforming provisions for lots, parcels, and land uses. Then 1226, which is your review authority and procedures. So that's listing out all of the applicable review authorities that would be responsible for implementing or enforcing the development code. And then all of the various entitlements that an applicant may have to apply for during the course of the development. And then it ends with the enforcement and the penalties. This is really the city's way of enforcing standards and then enacting the various penalties that may come forth with not following or finding inconsistencies with the development code. So I'll start with 1202, just the general provisions. You'll see that these slides are going to be broken up and organized fairly consistency here. So we have the purpose statement and then we have the contents there within. So the general provisions, it's one of the first chapters of the development code, really lays out the overall intent of the development regulations, why it's enacted, how it's enforced, and then some specific language in there on burden of proof, translation rules when it comes to language interpretation, and then some other technical aspects of enforcement, like third-party agreements. When do dates become effective, at the time of submittal or at the time of approval? So very, say, introductory text to the development regulations itself. Some of the areas that we cleaned up here, there wasn't a lot in this front section. A lot of it, for the most part, was in pretty good shape. However, there was some outdated language. One of the big things that we are incorporating, and I'm sure you've saw it during your reviews, there was a lot of wordsmithing done. Capitalization principles, new punctuation. There was also some outdated terminology that was in here. So master plan, that was the previous term for your comprehensive plan before it was changed to comprehensive. We also added in some efficiency where possible for the structure of how we're presenting some of this language in the upfront, as you'll see in some of the track changes. And then overall consistency of titles, acronyms, and permit types. There just seemed to be somewhat of a breakdown. It's not uncommon when you have development codes that are, when you have an amendment that may have an ordinance amendment, and one ordinance might be one term, then you have another ordinance 2 years later, they use a different term. Well, all those get codified, but if the terms aren't used consistently, it starts to create some confusion. So we went through comprehensively, did a hard search for all of the entitlements, all of the appropriate titles, made sure that everything was consistent. One of the things that we also changed here is the previous code relied a lot on acronyms. And while that planners love acronyms, from the typical user, it ends up being pretty difficult. What is your BZA versus your COC, and is your, so to make it as user-friendly as possible, we've broken down the acronyms. We're spelling everything out in clearest terms as possible, with the ends of just making it a lot easier to use. Next chapter that we updated is the non-conforming provisions. Again, this is the rules, procedures, and standards that are specific to non-conforming lots, parcels, and land uses. Oftentimes this happens when you have something that was legally permitted or constructed at the time of one development code, but now that development standards have changed or amendments have changed, now that use or lot is no longer conforming. Now, Ohio has, say, pretty strict guidelines for non-conforming uses established in the ORC. But from what our tact was, is we wanted to just take a look at that through a clearer lens, an outside lens, and see if there were any improvements that could be made still within the guidelines, still within the boundaries of state law. So in here, similar to the other chapters, we've consolidated provisions that were duplicative. We've brought in consistent use of terms, titles. And we've also then reassessed all of the various review authorities applicable to non-conforming land uses. So looking at how the BZA and the Development Code Administrator, their roles play into decisions and processes. One of the major structural changes that you'll see in this non-conforming chapter is, it was, as I had mentioned, specific to just your lots, land uses, and lots, what am I forgetting? And structures. One area that wasn't in this chapter, though, that we've brought in is the non-conforming sign regulations. So the non-conforming sign regulations used to live in a different part of your code. They used to live in the sign section. So we thought, let's just put all of your non-conforming provisions. So we've plucked what was in your sign regulations and essentially kind of swapped it around. So that's an organizational change you'll see. And then we also established some new language talking about expanding or allowing the continued use and development on non-conforming lots. The idea is the city doesn't want to penalize people for infill development. There's a benefit to infill development. However, infill development can be difficult to fit within the existing standards that exist. So a lot of the times what we find is non-conforming lots, vacant lots will just sit vacant. Well, that doesn't help the community, it certainly doesn't help the neighborhood. So through this, we're working with city staff to see if there's any ways that we can refine that, whether that is flexibility within what you can and cannot do on your non-conforming lot, and then also tying back to and making a stronger connection to some of the existing flexibility procedures that already exist. There's a percentage that the zoning administrator can provide a waiver on for certain standards, making a clear connection to that so that the applicant knows that if they have a property that's vacant, is non-conforming, they know for certain that they can work with the city to develop that piece of property within the standards that exist, or point them to at least the solutions that they know that they can work with city to modify a development or standards to actually build on a benefit site. Oh, we had questions at some point here. I would say the chapter that received the largest amount of our time, text edits, was chapter 1226. This makes sense. This houses a lot of important information for administration of the code itself. So in here we have the review authorities, and then we also have all of the various entitlements that may need to be applied for and approved in order to develop. One of the biggest changes that we've made at the front of this chapter is we've included a new table. This table doesn't exist, but it's a review authority table, where what we're doing is, as we've gone through each of the entitlements or the processes that one may have to go through, we've identified three things. Who is the body that would first have to take in that application and make a recommendation? Who is the review authority that then has final say or decision on the matter? And then who is the appeal authority after that? Right now, that information is in your code, but it's in paragraph form. It can be difficult to find, difficult to interpret. So what we're doing is try to forward this, make this again an easier document to use and interpret, is we're creating this matrix in here. What we'll eventually do that you haven't seen in this draft, and what we'll continue to work on, is actually an additional flow chart for each of the entitlements as well. That is not in this draft, but imagine the process outlined in a chart of sorts or a graphic. Again, just another way of trying to make these processes easier to understand for the everyday user. So one of the first questions, I think we have a total of 5 in them, believe that they were in the draft as well. One of the first discussion items that we have for the Planning Commission this evening has to do with roles and current needs and practices. So, I'm sorry, I'm getting thrown off here.
I think it's about historic commission, membership.
I can't remember what we changed, I don't know, I'm totally blanking.
Anybody have it pulled up?
Yeah, it's the tab to the,
Do you remember what we changed to the Historic Commission?
No, so for the Historic Commission, we reviewed the requirements of the membership, which is explicitly stated within the development code, and whether that membership requirement should be more broadly open. Right now, it's extremely specific, and at times it's hard to fill all of those spaces. And so part of the discussion with the Planning Commission tonight was as part of that is that appropriate to modify the specified roles as they're listed, to open it up more generally? Or do you believe that the roles should still be as specific as they're noted right now?
Yeah, if you fill each of those roles, I think you probably have 15 members.
It's quite a large list, yes.
Because, I mean, we have a lot more, or we have several more historic, divisions within the city than we had when it was originally written. We've got, 2 downtown historic districts that weren't in existence, and we have a conservation district. And they probably weren't there when these roles were originally written.
Right, and that's where there's some carryover from past codes that was transcribed into new ones, and that's where it may not be applicable. But right now, it is codified, and this is the opportunity to have that discussion to see if those roles are still relevant, or whether they should be broadened and opened up a bit more. Just from our experience, it is very hyper-specific, and at times could be very hard to fill those roles. They also have I believe it's a 4-year commitment on that as well. Jacob, it's a 4-year commitment, I believe, on this information. Which we had talked about, 4 years is, that's a long time. That's a strong commitment to have. We've seen alternatively that some other commissions and boards or committees will have 2-year commitments to allow it to revolve more. I think some people are hesitant to sign up for that long of a term, and so that's another part of this discussion. Is the 4 years too much? Is that a disservice to fulfilling those seats and having that commission work as it should? And so these are just things for discussion. Do we have any thoughts from the Planning Commission?
I had a question, was if we get confirmation.
Sure.
Do we currently on the historical commission, do they have someone from each of those?
No.
roles?
We haven't had an architect on there, at least the last dozen years I've been involved with. I don't think we've had an engineer for quite a while. There's a lot we don't have.
there is an attorney,
Pardon?
there's a member of planning commission.
Right.
Is that the same person?
No,
No.
that's me.
No, isn't it?
But it wasn't supposed to be.
I'm board of
No,
zoning.
no,
School.
It's a different committee you guys want to do.
So it's like, I'm the planning commission board appointee to the Board of Zoning Appeals, Mr. Cash is just also on that board.
Okay.
And the chair.
Just for now.
Yes.
Do we have an Oakland district member?
I don't think we do. And we don't have too
Central-
much in the downtown. I mean, I'm one of the
Central and
downtown,
downtown,
but
yeah.
not the other ones.
Whoop.
Like the Main Street commercial district, we don't have anybody.
Okay. I have a different theory about why we're not meeting the requirements for the constitution of this commission, and I have a different theory about why. I don't see any recruiting from either members of the commission or from the city. I think in the code, it says make all possible efforts to fill the ranks the way that is provided in the code. I don't think posting online or in social media even rises to the level of those semantics in the code.
I think I recruited you then.
You did, yes. And I don't know, I was thinking about this before the meeting today. I think the city could play a more active role in recruiting folks and looking for folks. We could, as commission members, could definitely do that as well. I mean, I was thinking maybe we take a picture at the end of tonight, and we're all smiling real big and having a great time, and post that on Facebook and say, we need folks from your district. You get great experience, you learn a lot, you rub shoulders with movers and shakers in the city, put it on your resume. I mean, there are many benefits to being on the commission, and I don't think it would be hard to fill the ranks the way we provide in the code.
I was thinking that last night. I was like, man, all 7 of us are here, you know. It would be nice to have like a photo, you know, post out, hey, there are things happening in the community, like positive, you know. There are avenues that you can, you know, get involved, make change, and there are different lanes, you know, like there's the community organizer lane, there's, you know, like getting involved with like other types of volunteering, then there's also like working directly with the city, and you can be in multiple lanes at once, case in point, but, you know, I just think that there's like when I tell people like, yeah, I'm on the planning commission, they're like, the what? You know, so like there's like a citizen board in town, like, yeah, there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of open seats, you know, so.
I sort of also disagree with the spirit of reducing the, what's the word I'm looking for? The requirements of the code to match what we're currently doing. I mean, those should only be changed if there's not good justification for having those people on the commission. We're a 50, 60,000 person city. We shouldn't be lowering our standards because we're not performing to our own standards. We should do better. That's my opinion. Is there something we could put in the code about, you know, recruiting or
Maybe
the effort?
not for in zoning regulations. I think it's more just a
On the
social
side or
media.
the-
I think it would be more of a policy perspective
Yeah.
by the city and the department to make a harder push for recruiting, but not necessarily codify it.
Okay. And you guys did a great job promoting this development code update, like following that example in recruiting and publicizing this stuff would be good.
But if I'm hearing that the list right now, that you'd be selling yourself short by cutting the list back, that there's intent behind having that detailed list. And then
Right.
if that's a recommendation to maintain it by the commission, then I would say the language as is works, because it does say to every extent feasible, try to fill all of those seats. If you can't, you can't, but at least from a policy perspective, market those, advertise those, and really try to fill it. Then I would recommend, at least from what I'm hearing, to leave it as is.
Well, I think we should leave it as it.
Could we hear it when?
You're right, yeah, agreed.
You guys
Did I
wanna
hear
put
that
it
there
up
are
on the screen?
15 seats that are on the historic commission? Did I hear that
No,
correctly?
no, there's only 7.
There's only 7?
There's only
Okay,
7.
I don't know where I heard the 15.
7 voting.
I
But
think I
there's
said
a
that-
lot of like, there could be a lot of
If you took all
overlap
these
with requirements.
architect and everything else, they added them up, it'd be about 15.
Oh, okay.
Because
okay.
it would be like if you had one from each historic district plus each of those roles, right?
Yeah, because I was like, man, 15 members is a lot,
No, I mean,
but
we've
yeah, if
got-
it's 7, that's, yeah.
But
We've
if
got
you're
4
like an
historic
architect that
districts.
happens to own a building in South
Would be
Main
double dipping,
Commercial, then you're
Right,
heading to.
there.
So registered architect, professional landscape architect, historian, archaeologist, city planner, person who's educated in building construction, a member of the historical society, can go up. One elector neither resides nor owns property.
Sorry, we'll get through the whole list.
One elected from each historic district or zoning district, which requires the approval. An attorney. Planning commission, and then non-voting member.
What's the purpose of having an elector who neither resides or owns property in a designated historic district?
Unbiased?
That's what I was.
Don't we specifically call for bias? I mean, we're asking for people who are
Yeah,
inclined
it is a
towards.
historical commission, you would
Yeah, I think what it
imagine
kinda-
people who are
yeah.
interested in historical preservation.
Would we, on the education board, is there someone who specifically does not have a student in the education?
Yeah, it's only
system?
2 of us in our,
There are two?
there's only 2 of us out of the 5.
But do they
There's only
call
two
for
of you
it?
that have children.
Do they? No, it does not. Only requirement for the school board is you have to be a member of this district. Or a resident of the district.
of the city of
In the city of Middletown.
So I don't have kids in the school system either, so now that we put it in that perspective, I can see why they would want to have a consultant who doesn't, who's
Yeah,
not in
can
the
you-
system like that. But I don't know if we should have that requirement in there.
I think it also opens the door for individuals who may not live in the historic district but are passionate about
Good point.
the historic district or historic development preservation, so that they have a voice on there and they're one of many voices.
And I think we did have one, Ms. Chin, I don't think she was,
Oh, Jennifer.
living in the historic districts.
Oh my gosh, what's this?
So is
But
it
she
a
was very
requirement to
interested.
live in a historic district in
Yeah.
order to be a member? So
No,
I'm
no,
like all
there's
the way
not.
back
There's
here and
not.
I can't see those as well.
No,
So
there's
Society.
not, but.
It's just
Yeah,
a
it
member
does.
of
And
that.
there is number
Oh,
6.
If you can get
From each-
one.
Yeah.
Get a person out of that district.
But number six is trying to get an individual from each
Mhm.
historic district to be represented.
So there should
But I
be.
think when that was written, there was only one historic district.
Now you
And
have-
they have multiple, so that's what
Now
you were saying, you could have
Yeah.
15
Yeah, you
people
could
on this.
have a-
You
Yes.
could, yes.
So
I
we
do
have.
have a thought.
We have, sorry.
Help maybe bridge this.
Sure.
Talk about it when I stand. So, I agree with Gabe on the keeping the requirements, especially on historical. But you are correct with the next generation to say, I want you to commit for 48 months, once a month, for the low price of free. So, but the thing is, and this is more of those unwritten rules. I would say, okay, we're gonna reduce this to 24 months, but if you are just, this is what you love to do, they also have a renewal, expiration, meaning that you can only do like 2 terms. But if you say, okay, I'm gonna do this for 2 years, and then I wanna re-up, then you can still say, all right, you only not do it for 8 years, and so you give other people chances. I'm from here, so I appreciate a lot of folks who were not raised here, and say, people should wanna do this. Okay, there's work involved, and there's time involved, but I think that is a good idea, because like in council, when you run, you know you're gonna do it for 4 years. But there's also many jobs involved with that.
Right.
But this is a true, I wanna do my civic duty. And this is across all boards, not just historical. I would really, since you're addressing this, but I would, once this goes forward, because I'm going to be back to where I belong in the private sector, I would make the mention of, okay, we've got a consensus to reduce this to 24 months, but instead of 2 terms, which will only be 4 years, we want to at least, eliminate it, let them run it, if they want to be, if this is their ethos, this is what they want to do, let them. Because you don't have people banging down the door. I mean, historical, we just had another person who resigned. This is because it takes time. So I think that's a segue in between of what I think, you guys need to think about, is reducing that, but then opening up the term to the 8 years that they had before, or no term limit at all.
You could have no term limit, reduce it to 24 months, no term limit, and let's just say there is a lot of generated interest and someone else wants to be on it, well then, that's great, then then there'll be multiple candidates
Yeah,
going
yeah.
for it, and it can
And then
be
maybe
voted
start
on
to
through,
get
so.
it.
I think that's a plausible way to do it, and it doesn't snuff people out that are really committed and wanna be part of it, that then if we had a term limit, then you could have repeating vacancies potentially.
Yeah.
The city council is actually determining who's gonna be on it.
Correct.
So, you take the list of who they've got and say, well, this guy's been on here for a long time, let's give somebody else a chance. I mean, there's no reason they can't do that.
Correct, and that's if, I think that's if there's interest of more than one party to have that, to fulfill that.
Right.
Correct, so
So
city
we
council
haven't had
can
that
switch that out.
situation too much.
And I do agree with Mr. Horn, and like, we're talking about having the problem of filling the board, but I'm just imagining, like, let's say that we're really successful at recruiting, right? And in 10 years, we've got 7 people that have been on the board for, you know, like X amount of years. I just feel like there needs to be some verbiage where there's like a cap on like the so-called, like, informally called like perpetual members, you know, like these people that are very passionate, the ethos. Just like, it's an edge case, I doubt that'll ever happen, but like, I just feel like to prevent that from becoming too entrenched, you know, to provide, you know, this wiggle room for turnover, I just feel like it might be, there should be like a cap of like 3 members that have exceeded like the old term limit, does that, if that makes sense? Like, not that we should have term limits, but like just some guidelines on how to handle this turnover.
But then how do you pick
See, I
these
don't think
3?
that, cause that's,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
it's
great
too
question.
much. And then like with boards, I mean, usually don't have that because it's a board with volunteer versus being something that's or elected.
Maybe it
You
would
went
just,
into that.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Maybe it would just be a review by city council for somebody who's been on the
Yeah.
commission for 2 terms or something like that, at the end of the 2nd term.
Like I said, I'm splitting hairs over, you know, a pipe dream, I guess, but.
But I think you're onto something there. You can have no term limit set, but the council would do a review for someone that
Yes.
went, you know, exceeded 2 terms. Council would review it, but the person wouldn't be kicked out of the post.
I'm assuming the council's reviewing it now, every year.
Right.
I mean, every time somebody's up.
They do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
But
window
this is-
for the appointing
I only
is
gave
like,
my
is
own
closing
thing.
now, isn't it?
No, what,
I think all
what
your
city
terms
council
say-
does is, we go into executive session, and they
Oh, yeah.
pick, they have people who fill out applications, and, the city has also been given tasked of checking that application, you know. I know felons deserve second chances, but you know, there's some areas we don't want them to be in. But they do, they go through the names, and at times, when folks are not the best fit for a board, we don't renew them. So, to your point, if someone's been there for 10 years and we have a younger person who wants to try it out, and city council can call that person up and say, hey, you know, you've been doing this for 10 years. Oh, you know, I just do this instead of, you know, because I don't wanna do something else. All right, okay, how about we let someone else do this? And they can make that decision, or they don't call them at all.
Right.
But yeah, it is completely city council in executive session, they vote, and then Amy Colshin said that. The thing is, we haven't had 4 spots and have 8 people apply for it.
Right.
Yeah, there's been times when we've had 3 spots and we've had 4 people, and then that's when they go through the application, and the one that came to my mind is the library. We had a person who was already there, and then a person who was already volunteering at the library, who wanted to get on this board. And then we had another person who just put everything else and also put the library on there. So we have to, even if they put, we have people who will apply for every position. So that the person that, we had 2 spots, we had 3 applicants, the 3rd one was just filling out, and we put them someplace else. So I'm trying to explain how this all works. So, yeah, when people reapply, it might be, okay, but what I'm trying to say is Amy, our clerk, will say, yes, Paul Horn has done his 2 terms, he's been doing it for 8 years. We have a unwritten rule that after 2 terms, he's out and we let AJ take his spot. I'm saying if you reduce it to 2 years, then maybe you still make it 8 years, or not. But have that asterisk there for the just in case. Because then, we had one guy who was really into it, but his life changed. He moved from here to Indianapolis. He wasn't gonna do the trek for the low price of free to come here once a month. So that's what I'm saying, life changes, but 2 years, and that's why I like what you're saying here, is more reasonable. Because if life changes, you can say, hey, you know, I really love this, but I'm moving to Kentucky, or I'm moving someplace else, or life changes, and now I'm working 3 to 11s at Cliffs, which is second shift. It's Middletown talk. So life can change. So I think a 2-year commitment, and that might draw the people that you're trying to say that wouldn't do it before. It's like, I can't do 4 years. I don't know what I'm going to be here in 4 years. 2 years is not so hard to commit. I did 2 years. I'm fine.
I agree with you, Paul, that the 4 years is scary. when you're applying. It scared me when I applied, so.
Yeah, when I applied, I was like, man, because I was still 25 then, and I was just like, man, am I gonna be doing this? Well, look, you know, just shorter time equals,
No,
you know,
I understand.
going forward, this is like a larger percentage of my life, you know, than, you know, but, it was like, yeah. But here I am, so.
I appreciate that, cause I was stuck on it 4 years, and I was like, well, I've been on boards before, and that's kind of what they are, but I appreciate you guys' input, cause it made me understand why. And you're right, a lot of people do see that as, oh, that's a long time commitment, so.
Well, what we can do is we can recommend reducing the 4-year to a 2-year, and then finessing the language. So it does talk about, it may be practice now, but we could codify the periodic review, so it's clearly stated that after so many years or so many terms, there is a review with an asterisk. So, yeah, we can definitely work with city staff to.
Even if it's as simple as like, you should try another board for 2 years and see how you like it, and, you know, diversify your impact in town.
So was our recommendation, our official recommendation, to keep the constitution of the commission the same, but change the term limit to 2 years with some fancy language around that? And then us as the commission members in the city committing to do this is extra code, it's outside the code, but committing to doing a better job of recruiting. We could do way better recruiting, and it's hard. I've been begging people to join Historic and Planning Commission on South Main. It's really hard.
I have a question and a thought. I guess from the city's perspective, and I don't really know, you know, much of the history of the Historical Commission, so I apologize if there's any, I'm making assumptions or anything. But in wanting to get, are we hurting to have people on it in general? Are we hurting to have people on it that are in these historic districts? Or is the concern more of finding the people who fit, say, the professions? So I know one thing for me is when I was first filling out my application to be appointed to a board, I was reading through everything, and I remember thinking historic commission sounded cool, and that's something that I do value. But I remember seeing that list and feeling very intimidated of like, oh, they wouldn't want me on this board.
Yeah, so that was my thought behind having this discussion is, I mean,
Yeah.
I look at that list and not everybody is going to fit within an
Yeah.
industrial town where maybe you don't have as many white collar, you know, we have a lot of people work Cleveland Close that live here, so that was my thought is while, and of course there is that caveat with the following areas of expertise shall be made, to get that, but for reference, there's 4 people on Historic Commission.
Mainly, we're looking for warm bodies.
Yeah.
So if even if we maybe want to keep that on there, maybe it's something of prioritizing the way it's presented as far as, I think sort of sounds to me, maybe part of it is just getting people who frankly, you know, just give a damn about preserving it and being on it. So maybe there's a way to, I mean, because it is listed first.
I almost think the
but-
first sentence of Part B achieves that.
Mhm.
And the reason I really wanted to have this discussion is because if you look at the planning commission membership criteria, it's not at all, we don't require a city planner, we don't
No.
require a
No.
developer, we don't require any of these non-additional hurdles, but again, as we all move toward a more inclusive society, I look at that as, wow,
I
that's
mean,
kinda hard.
is there a way, like, instead of maybe having some of those, I mean, so it's sort of included of, that have the proficiency and the interest. So, I mean, if you are a professional architect, a professional historian, archaeologist, is there a way we fold it into of having the interest, proficiency, and or professional background fitting this role? Because if I am not that, I wouldn't even really know what you're looking for necessarily there, but I can read it and know I have a passion for history. I enjoy learning about it. I appreciate it. But if I am somebody who is a planner, is a historian, is an architect, I could read that and think like, oh, I fall under that. Instead of, like I said, for me, of reading through there, I know that it says first the part of just you have a proficiency or interest, but I remember reading through and seeing all that and thinking like, that's gonna outweigh any interest I might have.
Maybe we need to get rid of that.
The first sentence.
In other words, we've never really had
Keep the
those people.
person.
I think we need to keep it, yeah.
And then remove the call
The-
out
the
for
red-
professional.
the
As it
Okay,
exists
I see
now,
what you
are
mean.
these like mostly like guidelines for what we're looking for? I feel like that should just be emphasized, that this is like, and like I said, I'm all the way back here, I can't really see,
Well,
you know, as well, what the beginning of part B
Well,
does.
it says to the
but-
greatest extent possible.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that the last
Interest
sentence
and
says every
proficiency,
attempt shall be made to include the
So
following
unless you know
areas.
other people will be potentially on there because we won't always have.
So it does leave the
Five.
door open. I just think perception when you're looking at the list is you hone in on the list and go, oh, it must just be that exact list, where the text above it says, well, no, try to encompass it if you can, but you're not limited to it.
Well, maybe we don't need the list at all.
I
I mean, it sounds
really-
like people get the wrong idea for reading the list.
Yeah, but-
Just maybe the verbiage of the beginning should be rephrased, cause like, we all agree that the intent is there, but it's still just a little like. I think,
Maybe
you
it's
know,
just, you know, the specific professions could include but are not limited to, and maybe we just
Mhm.
nix every attempt shall be made to include. So it's a little less restrictive almost. And maybe we remove it as a list, and maybe it's, cause to me, a list is very,
Yeah, you get it, so
like,
you know.
yeah.
Well,
And if it's
and
in
if you-
paragraph form, it's a little more, it's including but not limited to.
Yeah, and it's using some pretty strong like and, right? So it's under the assumption that these are almost mandatory. That's the way that it's reading as a list as opposed to like an or. So I could see how one would interpret this as essentially a mandate.
Or, you know,
Right.
we're lucky to have one elector from
But I
any
think it was
historic district.
mentioned before that the council ultimately decides on these. As part of the review process, as you're going through applications, are you looking at these rules and seeing if they're checking off? if you're
Yeah.
kind of-
Amy, the clerk of council, who is our matriarch, she makes sure that everything's tight and right. The application is just like almost like a job application. You have to say what you are, how long you've been doing it, and like I said, they do a little bit of vetting, because at the very bottom it does ask the questions that people feel uncomfortable with. But yeah, we make the attempt to do what we're supposed to do. The main thing that on a lot of these councils or the boards we have, we really strive to have a lawyer. That's the most important part. Architects, to Claire's point, yes, we are Steel City. People who have a degree is about 15%, maybe 20. But the thing is if you have someone, technically, according to the state of Ohio, with our latest grants, historical, even if it's not a district, from Braille to the river, all those houses are historical, because they've limited it now to 50 years. My house on Central was built in August of 1924. So I live in a 100-year-old home. So the majority of the homes in Middletown, from Braille to the river, is a historical home now. And you pick the districts that you want to pick. If you don't have a special sign, but that's what I mean. So yeah, we do. It does perk our ears when we see an architect, an engineer, an attorney, a tradesman, a person where they live in their areas and such. And they also, and under that application, they say if they're on any special things, if they're on a historic or a specific historic area. And that's, I know we're kind of focusing on historic because they really need people, because we just had another person resign from that. But on all boards, which we are desperate, that's the word to use. That's why Gabe is absolutely correct on that. And that's why if I don't say it, the mayor says it. Join a board. run for council, smile at a person, do something, please, wake up. So yeah, that's why they do an executive session, because they don't,
Right.
it's not that we're trying to hide something, but we also want to keep their information private. But it is a full sheet, it's online, you can see it in the application portion of it. So you have to say what you've done, who you are, and what your qualifications are, so we can also move them in the right places. Because some boards, they might be more stronger than others.
So I mean, there may be a recommendation to actually strike the list in its entirety out of the code and just have that list on the application itself.
You can do that.
I have a
What are your
recommendation.
thoughts on that?
I have a recommendation. What if in the interest of maintaining our ideals, which we all agreed were fine as they are, we keep the language in the code, and in the interest of recruiting the actual members that we need, we alter the language of, step up our recruitment and include that language in that kind of communication, whether it's posting online or on social media or the way we talk to potential commission members. That's where we use the language, the softer language about, we're looking for an architect, but if you live in the district, we want you, like that. My recommendation is to keep this the same, to maintain our ideals, which we agree are fine. We just soften the language we use to recruit.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, I think there's like a space between here, I don't wanna lower our standards. I do think that the verbiage, as it is here, needs some tweaking, but like, we can tweak this to, fits like, whatever we decide, the final recommendation is, right? And then use the softer language for the recruiting, like, you know what I'm saying?
I question whether there's a need for that, because when you all looked into joining this commission, were you looking in the code, or were you looking at something posted by the city on a different website?
I actually was just going down the website and was like, there's citizen boards, and then I was like, well, I got free time.
So you were in the code itself?
So this is
I
online
would-
as well.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
go to
I
the
went
Historic
online.
Commission's website,
Right.
webpage on our website, the verbiage you see here is also on the website. So
Right.
if I'm an interested citizen and I'm like, oh, I wanna join this board, and I see that, again, it gets back to a younger generation of, I'm maybe not reading all of that.
Yeah.
And I see a long list and I'm like, I don't hit any of those.
I think potential candidates should not be reading, this is for our consumption.
Well, this is
Potential-
for the general public.
Right, but
As-
this
so
informs
the general
us.
public, developers, as well as city staff is all.
Right.
This is what, one of the main things is to streamline.
It's there,
Fine.
it's available for them if they look into it.
Yeah.
But it's not a recruitment tool, clearly.
Yeah,
So,
you are
but I
correct
understand.
that the code is mostly for our purposes, but I just feel like that the code should be harmonious with, at least to the greatest extent possible, with the messaging that we're putting out, so I feel like it's, I don't know where I was going with that.
So your recommendation is to keep this the same semantically, but soften the.
Yeah, essentially, like, I think that having the standards of what we're looking for should be there, but it just, like, the way that it is now, like, I remember, cause it was only about a year ago when I, filled this out, and I was choosing, my first choice was parks, which, after last night, you guys should all understand why I'm very ecologically interested. Second choice was, planning commission, and then I think I did choose, like, historical, and then there was one more, I can't remember which one it was, it was probably the library, so, like, but, I was just like, oh, I doubt I'm going to, get this historical one or be placed on that one, cause I don't have any of these qualifications, so I put it on there anyway, cause, I was already taking shots in the dark, but.
So, I know that, literally, it says every attempt shall be made. There's nothing in there that says it's going to. It still reads to me, when I first read it and now, it still feels a little more like this is what we are first looking for. And I didn't I probably should have logically known, but I didn't realize, oh, they're hurting for people, they might still consider me. If there's a way that we could be worded of some sort of, like, while not a requirement, like the following areas of expertise would be valuable for appointment, something like that. to where it's very clear that this is not going to X you out of consideration if you don't have it, but is still clearly listed that these are valuable areas that people could bring.
So what if we said all applicants who have interest and proficiency in historic preservation or reconstruction or rehabilitation or restoration, or a determination to work for the overall improvement of the quality of the physical environment of the city shall be considered for this commission? Like, we're putting in there that we're considering, effectively, we're considering everybody.
Yeah.
We're not ruling anybody out for historic, so we should just make that clear.
I don't think there's a list similar to this on any of the other boards.
Yeah, that's
No.
why
And that was on the.
Yeah.
to me, it really stuck out. BZA might have, I think there's like 4
I
under
do
their
think
membership.
but they're general, they're pretty broad.
But it's a little less not restrictive.
It might say something about attorneys, we shouldn't have more than one of those on
Like
anything.
planning commission, 7 people that live
I can
in
still
the city,
sue.
so.
This says it.
If I took a swing at it and presented it to this group, is that a
So
typical
would
way
it-
to go about things?
Like taking a swing at an edited verbiage. Yeah.
I think it would be great, and this is, maybe, I'll voice this, if there is recommended language changes that you think would be beneficial to share with the rest of the group, I would compile that, provide it to city staff, and they can distribute, and then get that information back to us.
That sounds good.
And that's
talk
kind of
about
the
it.
purpose of the old new business, right, is to propose.
Yeah,
new
we can talk, that's
sections.
what I just told Gabe, we can talk about under old and new business.
But honestly, I really
Is
feel
there- what is-
the time commitment is where you're gonna get your recruitment.
Mhm.
And you tell them 24 months versus 48 months, I think you're gonna get folks who say, I can do that. And like you said, 4 years is a long time. 2 years is half of that, but again, I think that will draw more, and may even draw more of the people that you're looking for on the requirements. Because you might have an architect say, look, I always wanted to do this, but I can't commit 4 years, because I have a family and I have this and that. So I think that thought process across the boards of a 2-year would actually draw more interest. Because as you all said, when you looked at it, I was like, okay, I'll do it, but it's 4 years. And it goes quick, but it is a long time, and it's once a month that that city council needs you there to do the job, whether it's just be there to vote and to say adjourn.
Yeah.
Never
I
met
feel
one.
like we probably
I can only think of 2
covered
architects that I
this
think live in
bit
this city.
pretty well at this point.
Decker and Davis.
Property on Central trying to find, so I'm like,
Yeah,
well, let's go to Cincinnati and
he
see.
just worked for, O'Leary.
So did we approve the 2-year?
Apartment upstairs.
This
thing?
is all just
Just
talk-
discussion.
So you would have to put it in there to have it
All right,
brought up to the, yeah.
Let's keep on keeping on. Good discussion, but.
We'll stay here as late as you want to stay, but sometimes that's a late night, so.
Should we order?
Let me go home.
In interest
That's
of
why I brought
Mrs.
food and I did
Parsons,
not
I've asked
touch
that we-
it. I'm using a napkin. It's probably not what you guys want, it's spicy. I got.
I mean, be careful, we feel like it's 4 o'clock, so we can go
Yeah.
on for a
Yeah.
long time. Let's do it, let's do it, yeah, we're ready, come on.
I got
It'll catch
inspections
up
to
with
do.
you.
and everything else that they want me to do this.
All right, so a couple other changes we've made to this chapter. I'll highlight 4 of them here. One of them is we've further clarified that the development code administrator role can also include their designees or as designated by the city manager. It makes it a little bit easier for city staff as opposed to having a single person do all of this one task. They can designate it internally as they see fit. It allows just for multiple people to do the same.
Can you specify, I apologize, is this on a kind of case-by-case basis, or is this sort of, I tap you and now going forward in perpetuity you have that role?
It certainly can be a case-by-case basis, or I'm sure the city manager has had a formal designee for certain positions.
I can't think of ever being formally designated as the development code administrator. It really gets back to, we have a planning and zoning division made up of a whopping 2 people. However, so, like, I sit with you guys, our zoning administrator sits with BZA as well as Historic Commission, and there's just no true codified language that says that, so I think, and I don't know if we have to spell it out in the zoning regulations, how we call out that designee. Another important part of this is our code specialists in the code enforcement division within the same department. They will tackle some lower hanging zoning violations like parking on grass. But they need to technically be authorized to issue those zoning violations, so that kind of covers all of our bases.
Understood. That seems very logical.
So as opposed to like, for instance, like a reference in the code text would say an application shall be submitted to the development code administrator, we're not actually meaning it has to be that individual person, talking about the department, the division.
But when I read it, I thought there was just one individual.
Yeah.
Until I got near the end, you sort of define it as being that individual plus anybody designated.
Do you think that would be beneficial to clarify further in?
I would move it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can certainly do that.
Otherwise, I was thinking, you know, that person can
Just-
never get
just
sick.
that
or-
person.
No days off.
No days off.
Well, that's great.
It's just not a 4-year term, it's lifetime.
Yes. Lifetime appointment.
Well, that's great feedback. We can certainly build it in
Yeah.
to the front end. Another area that we looked at improving was who can actually clarify and who can submit an application. There was a little bit of flexibility, I think, when you read the language, that it appeared that landowners, property owners could submit applications. And so we wanted to avoid that to the degree where the property owner isn't aware that applications or entitlements are being submitted on their properties. Not that non-business owners or property owners can't submit. So what we've done is we've clarified that if a non-landowner is submitting the application, that they have to sign off on that application or their authorized agent. And proof of that they're an authorized agent or acting on behalf of the property owner would be required.
Well, I was wondering how you were gonna handle, because most of the property anymore is done on LLC basis.
Secretary of State.
How do you know?
So if you go to Ohio, Secretary of State Business Search, you can look up an LLC and you'll be able to see the register.
If the only thing you do, we should probably end up getting their attorney.
Well, sometimes.
But that's a legally defense, so that's what we do for, if I'm sending an LLC a zoning violation, I have to send it to their agent.
Yeah.
So that is a legally defensible.
Yeah.
Right, their agent is usually their attorney.
Sure.
Yeah.
Could be.
But at least you know they've been in contact with the property owner. Cause it just gets back
some
to,
point.
you wouldn't want the city to be approving maybe a fence on a property that a renter is
Right.
leasing.
No, I agree.
And then it comes back that, oh, so you approved it, and then.
I just wonder how they could get to the owner though, with an LLC. That was all,
I think all the contact information is at the Secretary of State.
yeah.
I believe.
And we do leave some flexibility in there for the development code administrator to ultimately make that burden of proof. If they feel in their professional rules that they've been provided enough evidence, then they have the ability to make that call.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, this allows non-property owners to make applications as long as it's like essentially been approved by the property owner?
Sure, you
Yeah.
can look at it that way.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just wanna put a little more guardrails on it, cause
Yeah.
that, currently.
I
we-
just like was.
We don't require a property owner's signature on a zoning permit currently. So if I'm running a property and I wanna put a huge shed in, I can do that. And then it just seems a little sticky.
It is, because then what if the property owner did not want that and
Yeah,
did not
authorize it? We
authorize
just,
that.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah. I think that should be.
Very logical.
Another area that we just provided some additional clarity on is that the city can submit applications. Currently wasn't called out as the city being an applicant, so we want to clarify that the city can submit applications. And then what we also did is we extended the time frame that the development code administrator has the ability to determine that an application is complete. As it's written right now, the development code administrator has 5 days. And from conversations with city staff, that just doesn't even, well, first of all, I think it's nearly impossible. And it's not current practice. So we've modified that to a better practice. 30 days is difficult. And so when we talk about deeming an application complete, that is that the development code administrator has taken a look at the application, the submittal requirements, they have gone through and they have determined that all the checks or all the boxes are being checked, that they have enough information that they can move forward with processing the application, writing a staff report, potentially bringing it forward to planning commission or council. Another question for us all is we also looked at your notification requirements, your public notification requirements, and see if there were any ways that we could improve that. So the state has very strict guidelines as to what has to be noticed, public hearings and whatnot. There's always the ability for jurisdictions to take that a step further. As I'm sure you may have seen in just your professionally or just everyday life, there are some jurisdictions that when a development is happening, you may have seen a sign announcing that development. So we're wondering if that's something that the Planning Commission would be interested in discussing and proposing to council. There are costs associated with these signs. Typically, the way that it works is you'll have like a public, depending on the project or the entitlement being sought, you may have a requirement to post either a poster or actually construct a full sign. Typically, the way that it works is if it is like a conditional use permit or an administrative permit to some degree, a poster that the city would provide the applicant at the time of application submittal. That would have the name of the application, the address on a standard format, and then there would be noticing requirements that once the application was submitted, that applicant was supposed to have to post that on their property. The specifics can be dialed in. The time frame as to when that has to be up can be dialed in, even the design. The other opportunity that we see are these larger signs. Typically, larger signs are required for larger development projects, subdivisions, new construction, and typically the applicants will bear the cost of the construction of those signs. Now, if familiar with sign law, First Amendment, there is an issue when we start telling people what they can and cannot have on signs. It is protected speech. So the way that jurisdictions will get around this is they will classify, they will classify it as an exempt sign or as a city mandated sign, and therefore the city then can impose content requirements. So content requirements on those larger signs could be contact name for the applicant, what is the name of the application number with the department, a general description, and then we could create some standards as well. Again, the posters, those typically come down and the city typically will bear the cost of that, nominal, still a cost. And then for those larger application signs, typically the applicant would bear those. There is not such a requirement now. You follow pretty strictly state law, which is fine, but there is an opportunity if it is desirable for the commission to pass those as a
And I
recommendation.
think part of this too is some individuals that may not fall within that separation of, 200 feet, if I'm right,
Yeah.
go, well, I didn't know about this project, and I'm still interested. The signs allow, is that extra push by the community to make more public noticing front-facing for those that maybe don't get the notification within that.
We actually had that exist,
Yeah,
and I
we
think
did.
that's why, one of our meetings, someone said, oh, somewhere else. Somebody went somewhere and they saw the sign,
I was
yeah.
telling you guys,
Yeah.
so I went to, my sister lives in Pittsburgh, and I was driving around doing whatever, and I was with my mom, who was in the car, and we passed a property, and it had a big, just a white sign with black text on it, bold text, says property is under the review for I think it's a map amendment, for more information, call this number. So that is one big practice. Hamilton also does the little, almost what you saw for election season, those little, 2x3 yard signs that you'll see on the two metal stakes. This property is subject to a public hearing. For more information, go to this website address.
I think Liberty Township does it too.
Yeah,
I think
Liberty,
it's really cool.
Westchester.
I think
I don't
I'm
know,
for
I
it.
feel like as far as signs go, and you guys are obviously way more acquainted with the actual regulations, but simpler the better. This subject, or this property is subject to a Board of Zoning Appeals, a planning commission, a historic commission, like
Public hearing.
public hearing, there's the word, thank you. URL, URL, phone number, QR code.
I don't wanna do QR codes. I will say that.
I was hesitant about the QR codes at first
Because-
because I use QR codes and stuff like at work, cause I work in a pharmacy, and like people do not know how to use those, but they, like, if the QR code brings you to like something that's publicly like accessible without, like, at just the touch of a button, that has all the information, I think that's worth it, but I'm not like married to the idea.
Can't we
Very
just
least URL, phone number.
Yeah,
Put the number in, and if they go to it, the QR code is there.
cause all I'm thinking about is how we would have to continuously update
Update it,
something.
yeah.
That's true.
Um,
That's true. Well, what if the QR code just brought you to a landing page that had all of the, like, you know, everything that's on the agenda for this month, essentially? Instead of it being individual.
But then the QR code couldn't be versatile, cause you have to,
Well,
you have
but
to
if
generate
it's
a new
for,
QR code.
like, it brings you to, like, the agendas for the boards for this month, and then it's, you know, on the sign it says Board of Zoning Appeals, Planning Commission, yada yada, drop-down menu, or, you know, it's all collapsed, and you just click on the one, and then it expands. Well, I'm not a web designer, but, you know, just an idea.
Real
It-
quick,
It seems like most of the controversial things that we've been hearing, the word gets out.
That's true.
Gabe, did you?
Yeah, how many, I hate getting interrupted, that's why I was.
Small
raising
notice
my
will
hand.
go.
But
Right.
how many of these cases are there at any given time, and how long does this typically last? I'm wondering how many signs we're gonna have out there in Middletown and how long they're gonna be there. Is it gonna be a visual nuisance?
Who's gonna take them down?
I think instead of making the applicant, I think city staff would be the ones to go out and place them, as
And
well as
then- and then remove.
fall, and maybe like in the day or two after the hearing, pull them back out. Obviously, if the case is continued, you leave it until the final decision is made.
How many are there out at any given time, do you know?
I have no idea, but, and just looking at your agendas, I mean, you had one conditional case last month. You had one conditional use case this month, you had a major amendment.
So never more than like 20.
And they'd only be up for that review period, and
Yeah,
then once there's a decision
whatever
made,
the
they come
time
down.
frame decided
Yeah.
upon.
Totally fine, I didn't know if there were,
And
gonna be
there's
like hundreds of them or just.
And there's two routes, because you can, the city can take responsibility for posting them, removing them, or it's on
I
the
would argue
property
it's
owner to post and remove, and it's clear that they must be removed within X amount
I
of
don't
time,
trust
and then you get
it.
in, but then you have to get into a code
Mhm.
issue,
I'm
so.
fine with that.
I'm just not sure we need it.
Yes.
Oh, okay, cause I wasn't sure you guys are just having a special meeting, but, in your notification process, I assume there are neighborhood organizations, block clubs or whatever that are somewhat active, am I correct? Or maybe not? I mean,
A lot of the HOAs get the word spread.
well, what I was going to ask is there any consideration to, when you develop your radius notification list, if maybe as a part of that, if, it's within, say, the boundaries of some neighborhood association or a block club or whatever that might be, that those also be added, even as a courtesy.
I would argue that's more of a policy thing rather than something to be added to zoning regulations. Like, so you have your monthly downtown Middletown
Right, we have our,
with staff liaison, and that,
Well-
it was always intended that staff liaison would give you notice of any subject
okay, well,
cases.
I'm not gonna get into all of the transitions there. I'm just saying yeah, you can call it, you can make it policy, that's fine, I'm just throwing that out, that becomes some sort of consideration. I understand you guys don't have maybe as strong a citizen input process.
Are
as
we
other
really
people.
trying to recruit people to come to our meetings?
Well, I think it's providing greater notification.
That's my point.
And I think what you're bringing up is like an exception based on location, if there is
Yeah, I
HOA
mean-
or neighborhood group or something that's within proximity, then we'd have to have a clear standard of determining what is that additional proximity. 'Cause
that additional proximity might be based upon a list of, if you're aware of a block club or some formalized neighborhood group that exists, then you know, it's not mandated, but it is something that is added to. And typically, it's probably gonna be more of the city staff that's gonna know about that rather than necessarily the applicant.
What would inhibit another group saying that they weren't notified over another, if one is just slightly further out? And I'm playing devil's advocate, I'm not saying your
Well-
suggestion's wrong, I'm just trying to, having been a planner behind the counter, I'm thinking
Oh, I
about
know.
how I would.
Having been a
try to
planner
think
and
too.
run both a planning commission board as well as a board of zoning appeals board, I understand that.
Would it be at the
But-
discretion, are you thinking at discretion of the development code administrator to make that determination?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is you don't wanna show up in front of city council and have that.
But wouldn't the sign also get the notice out to the neighborhood?
Well, let me just say, the last few, and there haven't been a lot in the downtown, because mostly they've been violations and somebody's come in. But I have found out through quiet sources, and it's usually been, you know, a day before, 2 days before, this thing is going to come before one of the boards. Whereas if it was a part of just that checkoff list, it would make it much easier. There may be some that you don't have any concern about, no big deal, not a problem. But there might be others where that could be a real issue. And we would, you know, that, not necessarily just for the organization I work with, but for any other association, they might wanna seriously weigh in on it.
And I would like to know, just from the commission's overall perspective, what are your thoughts on this suggestion? Because if there is an interest, in this suggestion by having a kind of providing more transparency in certain aspects, that's something that we could bring forth options on different levels. But I wanna weigh everyone's thoughts on this, cause I do think
Could
there's
these
some.
posters be options versus requirement? In other words, could you do that? It was when you think something should be spread out more?
But then how do you determine?
Here's the
should-
problem,
Well, I know.
there becomes a
So-
problem, whenever you leave the discretion to the development coordinator, that this particular area should get noticed, but this one we're not gonna worry about. You just, that's not being transparent, because
Okay.
now all of a sudden, all we're doing is we're deciding at the city government level, who gets notice over and above the 200-foot radius. You just don't wanna open yourself up to litigation and complaints, because that will happen.
If the signage is seen as too onerous, what about expanding the 200-foot radius?
Well, I would just see signage as burdensome myself.
Yeah, I don't particularly like the sign idea. And then how many signs do you put up
One on each.
around? You've got a subdivision.
One sign
do
per
you have
street
one per lot?
frontage.
Let me just wind it back here with talking about community organizations, block organizations, things like that. I think that maybe a different way to think of this as like, we have the public notice requirements, and then there's secondary public notice requirements where like once, you know, it's been contacted through the journal or like however else we want to expand it, that we take, you know, we keep track of what kind of organizations are operating in what part of town, you know, and
But,
so
but
you.
who's to say that if my organization isn't across town, I don't have a vested interest in this case? It's just.
But that's part of the, it's like a secondary thing.
I would argue
Direct
that's more of a
impact issue.
policy
I
than
guess that's
something to codify in terms of land use.
I guess that's fair.
I'm not really well versed in this, so is this something where, do we have like a hard list of where every HOA exists and who to contact for these? Cause what happens if
No.
there is one that we are just, we're just not aware, we don't know that there is an HOA? Could that open us up to litigation or even just, you know, bad feelings of, hey, how come you didn't tell us about this versus the other ones? That seems dangerous to
So
me.
what we have in terms of third-party agreements, in chapter 1202 is that we should, upon, I think it's at the time of final plat, receive the homeowners association, list of covenants, restrictions, et cetera. However, we are by no means nor bound, nor do we enforce those additional regulations, outside of what's in our zoning code.
So in theory, there could be some that are in operation that are working within a neighborhood that the city doesn't really know about, or, and they're not doing anything that's illegal, but.
I would think that the city has no requirement to know the existence of HOAs.
In which case, putting it into effect that we would have to send it to ones, then that seems to me opening up to trouble of, that adds a lot of extra work of, that would appear to me we would then need to have that list to know, so in order to not leave people out.
Or you have to be made, or maybe part of it is that organization needs to make the city aware of its existence.
I think it's getting confusing.
Very
Yeah.
confusing.
I
Here's
think
maybe
we
an
need to
alternative.
I mean, I'm just throwing it out there.
Sure,
Y'all do
sure.
what y'all wanna do, 'cause it's.
I do think I like the signage. I know for me, I'm not often on social media, and frankly, with just life, there are times where I won't even notice I'll pick up a letter and put it on the table, and then 2 weeks goes by, I'm like, oh crap, and there it is sitting there, so it's underneath a magazine or something. It's a nice physical of, like, maybe I don't live in this neighborhood, but I'm there a lot because I pass through for some reason, I have a vested interest to be at this park or something. This gives it a chance of, I am there enough that I'm seeing this sign, and thus, if I'm there enough to see it, I probably have an interest being in there. And honestly, it really doesn't seem like it's that big of a, like, we have, whether it's the police or some other like property maintenance inspection, you know, if it's this address, that day you go out, you put the sign, and then a month later, throughout the day, they come and they get the sign. That seems pretty easy.
I like it too.
Well, and it
Good
gets
idea.
staff out to the property.
Oh.
They could use that time to take pictures of so we have an up-to-date, look at it.
So, just maybe a revision of what I said earlier, this is definitely policy, but I'm just spitballing here. Organizations that are interested in being added into a notification list where, like, we have public notice requirements, and then the secondary public notice requirements would be like Middletown Connect, Downtown Middletown Incorporated, churches that are, the Interfaith Alliance or whatever they're called, I'm blanking. Like, these organizations could opt in to get a regular stream of information about what's going on with the city, and then it's up to their discretion on what to blast out to, because we're doing our due diligence in public notice requirements, but we want to build a network where we can increase civic engagement through further dissemination of information.
Well, if it's already on social media, I mean, that's as easy as just telling them that they can just check Facebook.
Yeah, agendas are available,
Like the day of.
What?
I only get on Facebook like every 2 or 3 days just to check on stuff, but I swear, like, if I see like the city council, stuff, posted, it's like 2 days before, or, not even,
If you get in,
day of.
if you get in the journal though, you got 10 days before.
I think it's.
I don't read the,
know, but it's-
Journal News is like my computer, like browser, like homepage, so that's how I get my news, but they don't post that stuff on the, I try to like look through the Middletown local stuff, but like,
But I'm talking about on the City of Middletown's actual website, if
Mhm.
you go to Agenda and Minutes Center,
It's there.
there.
okay.
That's why I get, yeah, I no longer go to the city site, I literally go onto that, and it's,
Okay, that's fair.
I got way too much stuff on my phone because.
Most people are not looking at the cityofmiddletown.org for their regular information, though. That's the purpose of social media.
Mhm.
Now, that's a good repository of information, that's the hub.
You don't have the home button for the city of Middletown? What's wrong with you?
Can I'll, real quick.
I already live here, okay, you know?
Alright, I would posit, I think this is a good discussion, we're getting a little afield from talking about signage. Can we, is it necessary at this point to take like a vote of if this is something we wanna see considered? Is there enough of yays to say this is something that's positively considered going forward? 'Cause that's what you're looking for right now, right? Is this something we would be interested in seeing?
We're looking at whether or not it's gonna be worth it for the commission for us to spend some time to craft some provisions for consideration, for you to look at.
Sure. I think based off of what we've been hearing here, that seems like a yes.
I'll second that motion if that's what we're doing,
What was it?
to have a vote.
To
of-
consider signage
Okay.
for a public notice.
But this isn't even, we're not, right now, we're not saying put it in here, we're saying you should put it in here for us to think about later. So let's not get,
It's already there.
So what would end up happening is based on the
I think you're-
discussion.
Signage.
I think it's just a show of hands to see,
Based
to
on
take the
dis-
temperature of the room, right?
Yeah, and based on the discussion tonight, what we would end up doing is we would draft some optional standards that would implement this for consideration, that'll come back to the commission and then at a future meeting, and the commission would decide, that's great, or no, we don't want that, and it wouldn't move forward to council, so it wouldn't proceed.
Maybe I do have one area that I could ask. It seems like there might be a hang up with the small, the posters and the windows. What if there was a requirement for just subdivisions and larger scale projects to have a property sign as opposed to individual,
Or
like if
business.
someone were to submit for a use permit?
Yeah, those seem to be the ones that actually do get out. And
Yeah.
People,
Are the smaller ones?
no, the bigger
The
ones.
bigger
ones.
the bigger
Okay.
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if something like that's going down, then that's something that like half the town shows up for, you know, or. Yeah, you should, yeah, you should have been here for the one that they proposed by.
Yeah, I mean, I know,
Middletown.
in my hometown, I've spent 11
Yeah.
years on our planning commission and nobody showed up for
Oh,
it.
no,
Oh,
I even
no,
got
it
an
was-
email from it in my school site,
So I don't know.
and I
Maybe
missed it,
it's-
so I felt bad, I'm like,
Something's
but they were
water
looking,
here.
I guess you
Yeah.
saw
Like,
it.
who comes from
But it-
subdivision?
Well, what we'll do is, we'll coordinate with city
Seriously.
staff to pull together a recommendation for your consideration. And then if it gets a thumbs up, we'll include it as part of a draft to go forward through hearings, and if not, it won't.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll bring some preliminary draft language for us to take a look at.
Very good.
Continue.
Onward and upward.
I'm just saying, yeah, this is very.
Okay, so we'll go, I think I have two more questions after this. I lied, three more questions after this. So, just some additional changes made to chapter 26. We have further clarified that the development code administrator is also able to submit applications. That's really important when we start to get into zoning code and text amendments. Also, we've clarified that you as the planning commission can also file applications or bring projects for consideration for review.
Well, I think we were already able to do that.
I think we've clarified the language further that the planning
Okay.
commission now can bring forward. I think it may have been implied, but
I know Paul was always
That was
encouraging us to do that.
Mhm.
I think it should be a standing issue in every meeting, we just ask each other, is there any building or any property we wanna discuss? So,
Can I ask
I
a
think we
quick
kinda
question?
do that.
No.
Yes,
Let me
Jeff.
ask my question. That's always been a concern that I've had. Now, I've been down here since 2017, working with Downtown Middletown, Inc. and I've had raised questions about text amendments, and the code already says, I think it's council, you guys, you know, there's no way for anyone outside of that cocoon to be able to create or raise a question about the need to address text amendments. Now,
Can a property owner?
No.
no,
Okay.
and so, you know, I went to the Board of Zoning Appeals a while back, and I've already mentioned to you guys about this use variance thing, and I'm trusting that y'all pick that up. But the point of it is, when I asked or suggested, it was not very well received. And so I guess that's just you know, you don't have to, you can, I think someone should be able to make that offer. They're a citizen or whatever, you know, you don't have to necessarily totally entertain it. Maybe,
I would
I
like
like
to
But
see
can
what
they-
other municipalities do.
I like the idea, Jeff. I think that can be justified for sure. Is it related to like being flooded with
Would that be for
anybody
us?
who wants to change their zoning, getting hundreds per week that you have to respond to? If that's not the case, then I don't see why
Yeah,
citizens
well-
shouldn't be able to, but.
or there should be some process that maybe you submit, it goes to the city staff, they have some internal whatever, and say, you know, this is frivolous, we can't do it. But,
Just my 2 cents really quick on this, also kind of coming in late of the discussions. Those that don't know me, Jacob Schulte, Assistant Director and Acting Director for Cities, Community and Economic Development. Jeff, I do think it's a great point. My one kind of concern looking at this from an administrative perspective as it relates to property ownership, right? If a property owner's not satisfied with the way the zoning reads for their property, what is to keep them from just start spamming us with text amendments and say like, you know, oh, well, I want R4 to allow for caustic or hazardous material. Or I want, you know, I use that as an example.
I know that part of it.
Somebody out there
I
thinking
agree,
that.
I understand that part, but what I'm saying is, we have, well, I guess if you're properly managing your code and you're tracking how many variances you're constantly seeing, you're seeing how many conditional uses you're constantly seeing, and saying, you know what, I think maybe we need to fix this, that you're at that point. But at the same time, there may be some issues out there that should have some level of vetting, you know, and you have a process outside of maybe, but to just say, no, you can't make yeah.
But
I'm
can't they
sorry.
go to city council? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can't they go to city council and express that, and then that, because that puts it on the table, and they have to discuss it. I know it may not be in favor of, because if it's majority saying no, but they have to discuss that and put that in form, because then that becomes something. And I know there was a prior issue to where there was something they wanted to address as a private citizen, and they continued, I would say, for 6 months, attending every council meeting, saying this needs to be brought up. I know
Well, I'll throw an example out, and I don't know if you guys are looking at that, and I'm not gonna, because I probably interject myself way too much anyway, but, for example, right now, okay, there has been, I don't know how many years, a moratorium on medical uses in the central business district. Now, you go to downtown Hamilton, you go downtown Dayton, you go downtown Cincinnati, you can go to the eye doctor there, you can go to a general practitioner, you can go to all these traditional, whatever, however you want to describe them, medical uses. And for like our downtown, nurses get paid pretty well, doctors get paid pretty well, all these types of uses, but they can't be in the downtown. Okay? And so.
We got a variance.
Right.
Oh, no, there's a more, I don't know if it's been
It's
lifted.
fully been
Isn't it
removed
removed?
from.
Yeah.
But it's still there, as far as my understanding is that moratorium. It was a 6-month moratorium, it's turned into, I don't know, 4 or 5 years or more.
We currently prohibit medical uses in the
That's what I
downtown.
said.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the text amendment was made to solidify that moratorium essentially.
The
So it's
text
no longer a
amendment-
moratorium, it's just a prohibited use.
Yeah, it's just a prohibited use.
Yeah, so it's-
Well-
but it's still achieving what the moratorium was doing. It just is now
But they
prohibited
don't
across
have
the
to.
board.
Achieving, what was it meant to achieve?
Well,
Keep marijuana out.
No,
I think that was the
I'm
reason.
talking about general medical,
It was.
Whatever-
You can't prescribe it, you can't have a
Methadone and all
business
of those
downtown,
things, too.
and
They probably don't make that
well,
assumption.
that's
If
when
they did,
we
I'd
had
be
the
like,
conversation
I mean-
about, well, maybe you need to go in with a text amendment to redefine what you mean by medical. That was the whole point. And that's how this whole thing came up. And I was told, well, you're not allowed to make a suggestion or submit anything. It only comes through these other,
Then I would
Boards.
argue it's on the private citizen or resident, or however you would define it, to petition to their council member, their planning commission member, make their case and have that planning commission member, or that city council member bring it forward.
well, we tried that too, but that's okay. All right, I'm just throwing it
And
out.
to be fair, as a, I do a lot of work with Middletown Connect and stuff like that, and, every time I go there, every time I go to one of these meetings, I'm always bringing up, like, guys, this is something that I do with the city. If there are problems, if there's, if there are things that you want to be able to do and build, they might not have the verbiage, I might not have the experience to fully articulate it, but I'm here to help, facilitate, trying to get that in front of, the people that can actually make it happen, so I understand what you're saying. I don't know if it's best served as like a direct pipeline or process, but, this is the point of community organizing. And I think what the issue is that Middletown is pretty unorganized as far as community organizations. Most people don't even know that these things are going on. So I think this is a matter of civic engagement more than policy or anything, personally, but also I'm speaking from a completely different position.
Right,
so.
well, and when I was bringing this forward, I'm doing it as a representative of a nonprofit organization that represents several businesses within a defined area. That's the whole point. And so if there's no portal by which that request can even enter, it seems, somewhat.
I hear what you're saying, Jeff, about the mechanism by which to make, clamor for an application for a change. I also hear what you're saying about the medical, availability of medical practices downtown. Is there some way we can table that for when we get to the actual? Because
Yeah, I'm just.
We'll make this work.
Okay.
Yeah, I just
Because
put
I
it
hear you
out
there.
there because it kinda,
We want doctors' offices.
Right.
Downtown. Some people might get mad at me for saying this. I don't know if rehab facilities are appropriate for Central, and that might be why, it might
well,
be the
that
spirit
was
of the law.
that was the
We should
rationale.
distinguish between the two, if that's
And
what
so
we
the
want.
question is, the code is, just as it's being considered now, changes.
Mhm.
That maybe this is something that you bring up to look at, so that traditional, whatever however you
We
wanna
should
define
look
it.
at whether commercial, we could call it commercial medical practices are appropriate for Central, whereas something that more like a rehab facility is
Right.
more appropriate for, the next street over, or two
Right.
streets over.
And that would definitely go into the next
Phase,
phase of the
yeah.
project.
Yeah.
And we would basically try to evaluate those uses, define them further, so there is clarity. And maybe the umbrelling of uses, it's not a word, but I'm gonna make it work, umbrelling of uses, isn't working in this instance. It's too vague, it's too collective, and it should be parsed out, because it is not uncommon to find an optometrist in your downtown,
Right.
or a use like that. And so we can evaluate those when we're looking at the zoning districts, the uses and the permit requirements, to potentially break those down further.
Great point, Jeff. Great point.
Thank you, I'll be quiet now.
We appreciate it. All right, so we'll move on to a couple of the areas of change. I believe it was brought up, the use variance process.
So we are recommending removal of that process altogether from the development code. It is an interesting carve-out, an interesting process. You don't see it in a lot of other jurisdictions. There are a lot of other ways to go about modifying a use besides just issuing a variance for it. A lot of other considerations in that entitlement process as well. If there is really a desire to change the allowability of a use, that would come down to the zoning and the district itself, and that could be either facilitated in a text amendment or a rezone. But there are already established districts that would allow potentially a use to exist there. Does end up being a way that someone can kind of circumvent really what the comprehensive plan has envisioned and then what the zoning does as well. So,
Could you give us an example of what you're talking about?
I'm sorry.
What kind of use variance are you referring to?
Do you have a recent example?
Oh my gosh, yeah, so. Where do I begin? So a use variance, let me back up, cause not everybody that sits on planning commission sits on board of zoning appeals. We have two types of variances. We have an area and dimensional variance that is more for your, hey, I'm encroaching on my setbacks with this, deck, or I wanna put a carport in the front yard cause I don't have access to the backyard to put it back there. So on the other hand, there's a use variance, so it's there is a neighborhood business, let's say it's like a market or something, it's in the R4 zoning district, and I want to make it an auto body shop. And it's not zoned for that.
Okay.
So then I can, instead of doing a map amendment, which maybe we don't want in the long term to see that continue to be a commercial business anyways, I'm gonna go to use variance now because it's not for a 6-month process, it's not $500, and I don't have to go to city council.
And we get a lot of those.
Oh, yeah.
I know what you're referring to now.
So now it's, instead of kind of bending our zoning regulations and zoning districts to make properties work for maybe uses we don't want them to work for, it's either, okay, we're gonna go through the more formal process of amending that map for infinity until determined otherwise, or you're just not gonna do it.
It's a finer tool, right?
I mean, that makes sense to me of, you know, if we have a code and a map, the expectation should be that we're trying to follow it, except I would say in very rare circumstances that it makes sense. It should maybe be hard to change some of these things, cause that's the whole point.
In a way, isn't this sort of, what was your name? Jeff. Isn't this sort of like a process like Jeff was talking about, where there is a mechanism that somebody can propose? Like, obviously they have to have like a stake in the property. You can't just propose this for somebody else's property, where you're able to kind of get this granular change, that's not like, in my understanding, the use variance expires when like the property changes hands, is that correct?
It expires when the use expires,
Okay.
so after 12 months, so there's also that. So if I'm seeking that use variance and I'm granted and I sell it to Gabe and Gabe's like, oh, this is fantastic, I don't have to do any crazy map amendments, I can just continue the use, it continues until he goes out of business.
You can have a use as an orthodontics office,
Yeah.
right? Get the medical part of it.
Yeah, so, and it goes by the definition, not, maybe it, you know, maybe I'm a doctor's office and I treat knees, I don't know. And then somebody else comes in and they wanna do a outpatient rehab facility, boy, cause that's a broad definition right now, right?
Okay, I understand what you're getting at.
That was part of it.
Okay.
Cause just like,
Yeah.
this Middletown Development Code, what little of it that I do actually know, it's all I know. I have no exterior frame of reference, I don't know how other towns do this sort of stuff, so, you know, this has given me something to think about, to look into, how other, you know, municipalities might allow, like, citizens who aren't, you know, on some sort of board to have this more granular sort of proposal system, right? But
I mean, a use
there
variance is-
probably are definitely flaws with the way
Have you ever
it
heard of
is now.
spot zoning?
That's essentially what
It's,
you're
it's
doing.
Spot
essentially
zoning.
what it
It
is.
is a terrible zoning practice.
And the use variance is
Backsided.
not.
But we get a lot of them,
David.
don't we?
Because they don't wanna go the formal applicant process.
Yeah,
It's the easy out.
The
for
use
it.
variance is not a common practice, and it's almost a loophole in the system.
It's a
And
violation
so-
of land use principles.
And it doesn't align with what the purpose of a variance. It's circumventing the process in a quicker, expedited, cheaper way without going through the formal provision. And so that's what we're working and discussing with staff. Our recommendation, when we read it, we went, ooh, what? And then staff's like, ooh, this isn't great, it's not actually following the formal process that we'd like to adhere to, which is already in place. And so the removal of this actually just keeps it going in a direct channel.
It's sounding to me that, unless anyone else wants to add, there's a general consensus then that we'd be cool with moving forward of getting rid of that.
Something we can propose.
Yeah.
One other question that I wanted to pose to the commission is right now, the process of finding an alternative equivalent for a standard is currently under the roles and responsibility of the planning commission. We saw this as an opportunity to potentially have that be a role to shift that down to the development code administrator. So we wanted to also get the planning commission's take on that. Is there an interest in removing that under the purview of the planning commission, leaving that to the application, the decision to the development code administrator, which could be appealed, still through the appeal process? But I guess the thought process is if the applicant can make a good enough point that the standard is equivalent to, or if not better than the existing standard, the development code administrator would being the implementer and the enforcer of the code, would almost be the best person to make that interpretation as to what is going to achieve that equivalent review. So just food for thought. As the commission, do you receive enough of these applications that you feel that it's warranted to stay? Or is it an area that you think could be reduced in or increased in flexibility and moved down to, I guess, a staff level?
So we're still talking the use variance?
No.
Sorry,
No, we're talking
switch
about-
to,
No, we're talking.
There hasn't been a single one of these since I've been here.
So I'm talking about the equivalent, what's the.
It's almost like an interpretation.
Yeah, so an applicant can come forward with an alternative standard that still achieves the codified standard in the code, whether that be
I
a,
see.
so standard.
And right now, the review authority is the planning commission.
Can I give you an example?
Please.
I worked as well, my career as a city planner. And even though the zoning administrator, at that time, we are still best friends and everything, but we would have full war
That was,
in front. And the reason would be, my only argument would be, he would make a determination, and my argument is, it ought to be something that's written. You ought to be able to have a written determination citing all of your documentation as to why. But rather than to put it on you as a body, where then you're almost being forced to become an expert in the area of what the zoning, at that time, we call it, you guys call, what's his new name gonna be now? This person's new name?
Development code
Development
administrator.
code administrator. Same.
Yeah.
Yeah, synonym, yeah. So you're not now being made to be responsible for trying to figure this stuff out. Your development code administrator should be the one that provides all the documentation for that. Now, that's especially important when you're going before the BCA, because the next appeal is not to council, but to common pleas court. So that's a whole, with you guys, you get appealed to city council. So, but you still want it to be pretty clean. Did I say that right?
I just don't know enough about this particular thing to have much of an opinion either way.
Does the city see a lot of applications?
I haven't seen a single one.
It's not commonly used, but it is a codified practice that can be used.
I mean, expert here saying that it might be best to take this and shift it down, a
I'm
level,
giving you my
you
experience,
know.
that's all.
Experienced expert, you know, I tend to defer to, experts on subject matters, so.
Well, so we, in this case, if this actually were to happen, so this would be, Claire, is this you who would then be the one, or who is the
Me
individual?
or the zoning administrator.
Okay. The alternative is.
Probably.
The alternative is it comes to one of our meetings. We have to make, and in that case, I mean, I know, I personally, I take staff recommendation very strongly. It could just be in that instant, you know, a staff recommendation is included in there. Cause this would also give it then, I mean, this seems like it's something that should be kind of done maybe publicly to me, or.
Kind of sounds like we're solving a problem we don't have right now, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can just think about this one and keep on trucking, because I don't see it much of a.
I would especially be, sorry,
No,
cut you
go.
off, but I also work in city government and for different city, but, you know, so I would be interested in more maybe what the actual city thinks about this too, of whether it would be something that is that cumbersome, or if they value being able to have the board's insight and be able to, I mean, because sometimes too, it's just nice to be able to say, you know, to have that separate, especially if it's a decision that's gonna maybe have some bad feelings, or to be able to say like, oh, the board decided this, even if the board totally they used your opinion to do it, it's nice to be able to have that when making some of these decisions within the public.
I agree with that. I say when there's borderline cases, I always defer to, I would like the board's input or the commission's input, because I can give you my recommendation, but then you guys actually have viewpoints that maybe I don't have, or maybe I'm hair jaded, or whatever it may be, or you know, even recent cases where, you know, it's the affirmation that I was correct in bringing it to you as maybe this use type or whatever it may be. And we can, again, have it all out in a public hearing where it's public record.
Yeah, I mean, just purely too, of just, you know, having, I like the sense of being able to kind of be that buffer for staff. You know, I mean, I'm sure if somebody comes in and they're mad, they could find out my address and stuff or something, but like, you know, I'm not here every day, versus they could come and pester you here at City Hall. But if there is that little in between of like, look, the board, I mean, I know I've had that, there've been stuff for me for at work of, it's nice to be able to sometimes say like, hey, you know, I know you don't like the outcome, but this was what the board, this is how we voted on it. Sometimes there's things I don't like, but it's, hey, the board, that's what they decided, I'm gonna go with it, and it takes it out of my hands too that way, so.
It gets back to staff recommendation of, you know, here's what I think you guys should
Sure.
include in your approval. And that's where you get the chance to say, this is asinine, why would you suggest this? Or actually, you need to go beyond, because what you're suggesting does not seem to meet the intent of what the development code gets at.
Jacob, do you want to jump in?
Yes,
Please.
I would like to just provide some concurring opinions of both Claire and Mr. Parsons. From a staff perspective, right, city staff's always supposed to be neutral. We serve the will and pleasure of city management, who serves at the will and pleasure of our city council. However, when we are liaisons to our boards and commissions, such as planning commission, it does help provide that extra layer of reinforcement that decisions being made, especially cantankerous or decisions that may be difficult, are ultimately decided by a jury of their peers, so to speak. So it provides that extra layer of our ability to perform our jobs and say, look, you know, this may have been an adverse outcome that you didn't appreciate, but rather than taking it out on the city staff that you're still gonna have to interact with, you know, if you're a housing developer, or you're an architect or something else, you may be interacting with once every other week. This, a jury of your peers have made this decision, you know, work through your elected officials on these decisions.
Okay.
All that to say, me personally, if this is something that staff would see as beneficial and more, make their job easier, more effective, I'm basically neutral, but unless anybody else from the board, I would say, and would consider, if this is under consideration, I would point to see what staff, what their feelings are.
Same.
I think we're all in agreement on the
Okay.
process.
Onward and upward.
All right. Promise, we are almost done.
3 slides.
3 more slides. Another question, another area that we changed has to do with the administrative fee waiver. So right now, the city manager has the ability to waive and modify fees for applications. That is right now only the city manager's role. We are proposing to see if there is a, well, not their only role, but as far as.
I like how you said it.
I was like, wait a second.
Somebody just added that.
Ashley's like, I'm sorry. They are the only person that has that, the ability to do that. We are bringing it before the Planning Commission tonight to see if that would be something that would be better served as a role of the development code administrator instead. As the person taking the application, looking at making the determining that the application is complete, looking at what the application is for. There may be justification that they would be equipped or armed with the power to make the determination whether or not an application fee should be charged.
So, and there are a set of findings that have to be met.
So then, yeah, with that, thank you. We have crafted, in order to make that determination, right now as it stands, it's at the discretion of the city manager. So there are no review criteria. It's just at their discretion. Because we are making this recommendation, or at least proposing to have this be something that the zoning administrator would take on. Of course, I went to the wrong waiver. We've crafted a set of criteria, essentially findings, that would have to be made in order for, why am I not finding the fees?
I think it's the last one.
There we go. So what we instead done is we have crafted some required findings that the zoning administrator would have to make in order to grant a fee waiver. So we have these listed here. We've left them kind of broad, as opposed to the review authority would have to make all of these findings. We've instead just specified one or more of the following findings. If the development code administrator can make one or more of the following findings, they, in their power, could waive an application fee.
This makes the process more objective, where currently it's pretty subjective. It's at the discretion of the city manager how they feel. Where this, if we're lowering it down to the development code administrator, they do have to make one or more of the findings. It's pretty clear, which is a fail-safe to put into play. But again, this is just a recommended approach.
Or alternatively, we keep it under the purview of the city manager, but instead we now establish new review criteria as opposed to it being a subjective decision.
I'm just curious what.
So reading through them, I mean, it was pretty broad, but it is still, it did cover a lot of things that it made sense why they were all in there. Can we go ahead and read through them maybe real quick?
Yeah, here, I'll stick on that. So the proposed project will provide demonstrable public benefits such as the provision of public facilities, infrastructure improvements, or community serving amenities.
Okay.
The project directly supports implementation of the comprehensive plan and adopted city policies, such as those related to affordable housing, sustainability, historic preservation, economic development, or reinvestment. The project is located in a special interest area or development opportunity area as identified by the comprehensive plan. The applicant is registered as a 501c3. The application is being refiled due to an error, omission, delay caused by city staff or departments, and the fee would be waived essentially to remove the burden, or the applicant has provided proof of financial hardship that would make payment of the fee infeasible or difficult.
For city staff perspective, it is based on the updated fee schedule. It is preferred that it remains at the city manager level. However, we found it'd be really good to have your guys' weigh in. myself or the zoning administrator is a lot more accessible than the city manager.
It would seem to streamline it if you, and plus the development code administrator, which would be, and you had direct contact with the applicant in order to obtain information to determine whether any of these criteria are satisfied. It would seem to me, you don't want to do it, but it
I
would seem
just wouldn't want to be absolutely peppered with waiver requests.
Well, wouldn't the city
this-
manager be peppered with waiver requests?
I would argue that I would argue that as an average applicant, I would be a lot more, I would have a lot more
Target?
gumption
Yeah.
to seek out this, the city planner or the zoning administrator's approval and plead my case than go talk to the city manager. That's city staff perspective.
And so, yes, to elaborate a little bit more on the city staff perspective, and please don't let Claire and I's, feedback and comments right here cut the conversation off in the
You do
past.
everyone do this.
However, my kind of twofold conversation piece on this, the abuse of the fee waiver, as our fees have increased, especially once we get there, some of you may see rather substantially, a repeated ask for these waiver requests. A lot of our compliance and regulatory divisions under the Community and Economic Development Department are partially, if not fully, funded on fee revenue.
Right.
When it goes down to a lower level management decision that makes these fee waiver, directives, I think the fear is, it's the person at the front counter every day, hey, I come in here, I'm a frequent flyer, can I get some slack? It makes it very difficult for us on that end of the business, but also from a development perspective, the most recent waiver I'm aware of, and of even recent, we had an industrial project for the Board of Zoning Appeals that the city manager had made a waiver of the application fee for the $300 for the BZA. Now, as an economic development incentive tool, which is kind of more my background, the ability from city management at the highest level of the management department to kind of help be able to craft that policy still kind of, to me, helps, it helps build out some sort of soft incentive that we can help work with through the development or redevelopment of the community. But again, please,
Well, I agree, it might be best to keep it at the level of city manager, but it definitely should not be subjective. There needs to be like objective criteria.
Does it work now? I mean, does the waiver system work, is it cumbersome for applicants to take it through you to the city manager, or however it gets to the city manager?
Typically, nobody generally asks for it. I think of two. One case being we actually thought of offering that applicant that went to Board of Zoning Appeals that waiver to kind of show the city's support of like, hey, I know this stinks, but we really want to get this project moving. The other case was an application was effectively denied by Planning Commission due to a 3-2 vote. There was some discrepancy of if they were approved on record versus not approved, so they requested to have the fee waived for their next application. The acting city manager at the time denied that request.
Well, I kind of agree with Jason just said. It takes you out of the fray from the applicant, and there is that one layer of separation that allows you some objectivity, and you're removed a little bit more from that decision making, so that you don't become the frequent flyer top target. I can understand that. That makes sense.
I concur with all that. I think keeping these standards, but keep it with the city manager. One thing that I would maybe add is, personally, I think the item E, I feel like that should just be standard, personally. If that, I don't think that should even be a consideration of, this
That's an
could be
automatic fee
one. I
waiver.
think that automatic, personally. If that's on us, then that's on us. That, if I was the person that, because it was not my fault and that happened,
Good point.
they're probably going to anyway, but I think even having that, like, don't even make that be part of the process. That should just be personal. I think that you just get with it.
That's a good, yeah.
I've never had the authority and we've never won. And the other side of it is, the fees is how these guys get paid. So, I know you said you incentivize somebody, but.
Yes,
I mean.
But that was also in the, again, the onus of that was an economic development industrial project. The long-term income tax withholding far outweighed the $300 application fee.
Right.
But it allowed us to kind of justify it as we go to develop, redevelop, encourage through our comprehensive plan,
And they were happy when they felt.
expansions.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
So then I will end here.
Can we look at the fees?
That's,
Yeah,
Oh,
with the fees.
yeah, that's what the next question is
sorry.
about, yeah. Fees.
We have a couple of questions having to do with the fees, both for applications and then also penalties. So one of the larger areas that follows this waiver, administrative waiver, a fee waiver section, is we went through and we did preliminary analysis of the existing fee schedule for applications. This is one of those areas where we actually looked at surrounding jurisdictions, just to get a feel for what are other jurisdictions charging in the area, what's appropriate. I think from what we found, a lot of the fees were quite low in some areas. So anything really that's having to go before a review body in which staff is taking an application, determining it is complete, doing public notices, mailings, organizing a board or commission, takes a lot of staff time. And ensuring that the department, the city is being reimbursed for that time is essential. So what we did is we've tried to find those areas that we felt were relatively low, try to bring it on par with the area. So I should say it is on par with the area. There is justification for increasing these, there's justification for decreasing these. It really ultimately depends. You can find argument for anything. But if you look at the area, what your applicants are most used to submitting to developers, this is what we're finding. So you'll see that for some of these larger applications, that fee has been raised to $500. This kind of matches some of the existing fee structure that you have for, let's say, final development plans. Some of these have increased slightly, like a conditional use, minor amendment to a conditional use permit, that's increased slightly. We've also looked at how we charge the structure of how we charge certain developments. So in some cases, we're building in a per unit fee in addition to every application, in addition to just a base amount. This really is important when we start to get into subdivisions and some larger developments that have multiple units, how we're actually going to be reviewing each of those units separately. And then we've also added some new, that weren't previously called out, but some new processes, like the development plan, major amendments, and time extensions. Those didn't have a formal process or a fee associated with them, so we've proposed a codification of that fee as well. And then this runs through some additional processes that haven't been listed. One area that we will be touching on in later phases is the vacation and the dedication of public rights of way. We'll get into that when we work on your subdivision regulations. But generally speaking, what is the Planning Commission's initial reaction to these fees? Do they seem relatively on par?
I have no frame of reference. I just know that if the fees are being increased, then definitely the waiver request should not remain subjective. There needs to be like an objective framework to work on if we're gonna be charging people this much more. I understand like inflation and all that, trying to keep up pace with the area. I'm not necessarily like, you gotta get these people paid. So I'm not really opposed to that, but like if we're gonna jack that up, there needs to be some sort of standards that go along with, you know, waiving it. That way, as a community organizer and with somebody who's got, you know, an interest in trying to help the local, local people start local businesses, you know, being able to have these waived in those circumstances would be beneficial, you know. So I think these two need to go hand in hand.
I also want to.
In the surrounding or comparables, was it like Butler County?
Mm-hmm.
Did they have rules about like a structured waiver rule book like we just looked at?
They have waivers, yeah, not necessarily to the degree, I can't remember. if they
Rules
would-
about the waivers, I mean. Like, did they have criteria?
Findings for the criteria, I believe Hamilton does.
What I'm trying to get underneath here is it adds an administrative burden to our city and therefore a cost to have those
To confirm
those
those
criteria, to
findings.
confirm the criteria. If we're raising the cost of the, what is the fees, yeah. But then increasing the administrative burden of our city, what are we accomplishing? I mean, if we're going for fairness, that's fine, but if we're going for, trying to keep up with inflation, I think is the way you put it, then that kind of defeats the purpose of it. Maybe we could do both and increase the fees even more. I don't know if that's what people wanna do, but.
I wanna piggyback off that. I do not want to ever be pushing the administrative waivers. They're in there for a reason, but we never offer that up to an applicant, because every single applicant is by God gonna take that.
I
So-
would,
Put my face.
counter maybe Gabe, that I think if it were me deciding, I would maybe find it easier to have the framework versus if it didn't, then I would be trying to decide it, taking the time for myself to consider that versus if I already have, does it meet these, does it not? Nope, yes, okay. Versus how am I gonna think to justify this?
Mhm.
So maybe it could, depending on the person, maybe it could be a time saver.
So, in the case of Hamilton, were their fees similar to what you're recommending, and they had the criteria as well? Let's just do what Hamilton does.
I have to look exactly. I can't remember. As far as the fee structure goes, yes, we looked at 5 surrounding jurisdictions. These fee structures are now relatively on par.
Okay.
I can't, I don't wanna tell you anything wrong. I believe Hamilton has review criteria. Then I looked at 5 other jurisdictions, so I may be.
But the review criteria here would be, I would say above what other communities are doing, just to make it clear for staff when looking at that administrative waiver.
And I think we did that because we were also proposing reducing the level of review. So creating more boundaries, I think was the.
So more guardrails, because if it did drop down to the development code, it's going down to staff level. You wanna make sure that lane is narrowed, so it's not used, prolific. So-
I do think that it's a broad enough swath of things that if it really is, ideally, say the city manager would be doing it because it is of benefit to the city, I feel like they would be able to find and have a good thing to point to there versus having to come up with it on their own. Honestly, if it doesn't fall in any one of those, I mean, I'm sure we could maybe come up with a reason, but like, as a resident, I kinda like the idea that those would be the things that could get the waiver. Outside of that, I don't know, it sort of seems like, I don't know, maybe they don't need a waiver, so.
I agree.
If we're, and it's especially too, as far as, this is the, fees is the not fun side of interacting with government and stuff, but as long as we're at least close to the people around us, especially comparable municipalities, I don't think there's really much that we could say otherwise to argue that. I think that just makes sense. We gotta take in money sometimes and function, so.
It's a jump. Are we trying to get the numbers? It makes sense.
And then with that, we also looked at increasing the proposed, drafted, increases in the penalty fees as well. So right now, those are relatively low in comparison with other, again, surrounding jurisdictions. $150 for the first violation, and then subsequent violations move up from there to $250. Surrounding jurisdictions are starting at $500, starting at $600. So is there, do we see enough violations happening
Oh.
where this would be of benefit? Yes.
So before it even gets to a civil penalty, let's kind of walk through the process. Resident A calls in, my neighbor built a fence without a permit. We go out and inspect it, by gosh, there's a brand new fence there. Take the pictures, send the letter, certified, post the property, whatever the inspector wants to do as defined in development code. The property owner that built the fence without a permit, they don't wanna be in compliance, they don't respond. 20 days lapses, they don't respond, we go out, we inspect the property, the fence is still there, no permit received. Then you have the decision as the citing officer, whatever the title is, to either go a civil penalty route or a criminal citation. Criminal citation, typically reserve those for a bit more egregious, outside of building a fence without a permit. But then you can go a civil penalty route, where then, you cite for $150, they have 10 days to pay. If they do not pay, then they're issued a default penalty on top of that. I think it's another $150. And then you go out in another 20 days, you inspect, fence is still there, no permit received. You then ramp it up to $250. They don't pay within that 10 days of receipt, you've got another default fee, but sometimes it's easier to pay the penalty than be in compliance.
Anecdotally, we actually had a situation, I think it was several years ago, where it was cheaper to pay the penalty for tall grass than it was to pay somebody to actually mow the grass. So it's a great example of why penalties, especially having a severity to them, help enforce compliance.
Is there a waiver to the penalty?
No. You can appeal
No.
your zoning violation.
I was like, I have a landlord, he keeps appealing, and
You can say, I know,
he blamed it on the
the
tenant.
fence has been here for 20 years,
Yeah.
even though it's brand new wood.
Yeah.
Did you believe that?
Let me ask you, Claire, when these currently, whatever the fine is, civil citation fine is imposed, and of course, getting payment probably in some cases is impossible or that's never made. Does this constitute a lien against the real estate?
Once, either myself or the zoning administrator issues that civil penalty, we then take our complete packet, down to our paralegal, and she
Okay.
then pursues.
I assume there's a mechanism in the
I don't
revised
know.
code for imposition of lien.
I think what we can do is we can stack up those civil penalty fees, and then if we can't get any response, we can then restart the zoning violation process, and then go the criminal citation route.
Yeah.
And then we can say we have this many unpaid civil
Still doesn't
penalties.
get you paid.
It does.
But if in court, we can say we want restitution of these fines and also be in compliance, then maybe the judge will feel generous and.
It's interesting, 'cause I'm curious where that,
But I can't speak to really what happens to it after.
legal code, law department code.
Is in scope here, I'm asking if this is in scope, somebody removing brackets from a historic house and not putting them back up, they would be fined eventually. And then if they didn't pay the fine, they would be fined again at a graduated rate. And then where do they go from there? This is just wondering.
This sounds
Completely
crazy.
hypothetical.
Completely hypothetical.
You looked at me, it's not my house.
Yeah, sorry.
If they are not in compliance, if they pay the fine, they're still not in compliance, because they took something down that they did not have permission to in a historic district, which I know what you're talking about. But, yeah, it can be compounded, yes.
Okay. I need to know how to threaten this person.
Maybe with our
Appropriately.
new notice of potential violation,
Hey.
which is one more area that I want to bring up before we break today. So we have built in a new informal violation process, and a way of codifying standards that a pre-notice violation would be sent to property owners or potential violators before formal action or before formal enforcement letters would be submitted. So it can be at the time that a complaint is submitted, before city staff has had a chance to verify if there is a violation, or it can be used if a violation has been found, but formal proceedings or formal notice of violation isn't desired yet. So we've built in a new section. We have applied and made it clear that it is an informal process, but that within that informal process, the city still can take formal action. But it is a way, at least, of the city, if we are looking at increasing fees, it is an opportunity for voluntary compliance before formal action, before the formal action starts.
Kind of a threat.
I would say a friendly notification.
You're smiling with the teeth, but you haven't actually.
Strong recommendation.
I do think.
Very strong.
It's essentially a
Well, and
warning.
it also,
But also a notice that there has been that a violation has been brought up, not that one has occurred. And so I think that's the important distinction here, is just a notice that would be.
Well, that's a lot
hard
for,
to prove,
as a
Chris.
staff person, when I was doing it, that's
But
a whole
it-
lot
it-
extra work.
Shake the tree.
And I
That's
believe.
all I'm gonna say.
and I
we
believe
have been
that
using
Claire-
them.
Yeah.
So we,
Are they working
we
effective?
have, yeah, by gosh, they have.
Oh.
Sorry. I'll let you
No,
finish.
go ahead.
I would say personally that this would take a burden off me in the South Main District. I have to type up those letters myself and post those. That's like one of our policies as the association. It is a burden on me to have to walk around and do that. I'm not like doing it all the time, but yeah, it's uncomfortable for me to have to do that with my neighbors. I don't want to do that stuff. So having the city do it, it's more official. It takes it off my plate. What I'm saying is this helps citizens like myself.
I think just blame Claire.
Exactly.
Good.
I do think too, it's
gets
nice.
More work,
It's
more
like-
blame.
It's actually makes a decision, I'm so sorry.
I'm very much in favor of, we have these codes and laws, we need to be following them, but, you know, life can be hard, things happen, some of it, they may not really be ignorant of it, but there may be cases where they truly like just didn't realize what they were doing was wrong, or didn't realize they're out of
Sure.
compliance. This creates a good opportunity to also build a relationship with the city too, of where we can start first of like, look, we just want you to know that this is the code, here's why it is, and we're gonna give you the opportunity now to fix it. And maybe we can use this time to explain too, we're not gonna necessarily hold their hand through it, but I know I would appreciate that as a resident of, it's kind of a one freebie of here's your chance, because ultimately what we want is for them to be in compliance and for to do what they're supposed to do. If they can do that off of a reminder, that's great, because either one, they're not gonna do it anyway, and it's not good. But maybe we could save ourselves some headaches of, there's some people who genuinely, stuff happened, they didn't mean to, and we can keep this relationship good with this property owner instead of them, oh, the city's all out here, they're just trying to find me, and they do this and this, they don't listen, they don't care. This seems like a nice, if we're already doing it anyway, but it's good. I'm a big fan of codifying as much as possible, especially too, that way when we get new people coming in, it doesn't have to be institutional knowledge, it's already passed down, and we know that they're gonna continue that.
And there's language in there that they've provided that says at the city's discretion essentially. So
Yeah.
if you're doing something crazy,
It's not mandatory.
It would
then,
not be.
yeah, we're gonna absolutely go the formal notice of violation route,
Yeah.
because we don't want you running a pig farm on Central Avenue.
Sure. But so the small ones, somebody's never had an issue before. Yeah,
And I
gives
think
you.
we actually had someone come to, a meeting, and that was it, like their issues was that they got this, violation and they couldn't afford it, and they're like, they're coming at me again and I can't afford it, and so I think the warning would have been, they would have had time to look at options, but I think it was more so they felt like the city was picking on them, cause that was said, and I'm like, that warning kinda says, oh, cause they probably didn't know it, they knew they were in violation, but it just helps I think the communication and the collaboration together with our residents and the city.
Just thinking of the kind of financial situation that most residents are in, you know, I think it's good to have this preliminary, like, warning, you know, nobody, we don't wanna be the bad guys, you know, just like micromanaging, you know, and hitting people with fees and like, essentially like, almost turning it into, like, not saying that this is how it is, but it could be construed as, like, you know, picking on people, trying to fish money to, you know, like, pay the city's bills, yet regardless of the reality of the situation,
Yes.
that's how it could be perceived. But like, you know, financial times are not good right now, especially for people in, you know, this city and this region. So just being able to have that informal approach. First, let's try to get this problem solved without turning it into a whole thing. And then, you know, obviously if they're not in compliance, it moves on to that next stage. I think that that's excellent. And with that being said, I've been rocking back and forth this whole discussion on increasing the fees. I was initially opposed to that, but, you know, a marginal fee increase for violations that have already gone out of this informal warning stage, I think that would be justified. But I was definitely feeling opposed to an increase without some sort of preliminary steps, so I'm glad that that was included.
I still think it's too high for our city, I'm sorry.
Can
Just to be
I-
honest. I mean,
I
we are,
agree,
I
but,
think,
you
it-
know,
and I
The fee
respect it.
structure or the violation?
The fee structure, I think it, well, the violation, I'm sorry.
Violations.
Violation.
But,
Yeah.
but my argument is it gets back to, we have our zoning regulations, and they're not a suggestion.
You're
It-
Okay.
It is law. And if we wanna, you know, use our zoning resolution to further the goals of our comprehensive plan.
This is
Follow it
something, this is a
fully.
And you-
concept that's
and with
invisible
the
to most
inform-
people, you know?
Yeah, and with that informal
You're right.
letter built in.
We're all
that's up
speaking
to
from a point of
40
bias,
days.
we're all interested in this, you know, I have roommates, I have friends, I try to get them active and civically involved and things like that, you know, I've urged them like, hey, I know you've got free time, join a board, you know, but, like, what we're talking about, this is an invisible, like, structure that is, for some people, feels like it's being imposed on them, right? And so, like, I agree, it's a law, it's not really like a negotiable, but at the same time, I think we have to realize that we're not operating in the same sort of mindset that the normal person who's just going about their daily life, they're not thinking about like zoning laws or like if I'm in compliance with the city, you know, that's just not, that's something that they get a wake-up call. That's what the warning letter is for, you know, so like.
I think doing the warning letter and increasing the penalty solves the two problems that we have. The first is that lack of transparency and lack of a grace period. The second is giving our code some teeth. I can tell you, speaking for people in South Main, that they talk about this all the time. We need sharper teeth because people just don't listen. So I like both of the updates. I like the pre-notice notice and the graduated.
When, what is the previous fees, what, from, when did those go into effect? Like, how long ago are we talking that was the amount? Like, was this raised last year, was this raised 10 years ago?
2018.
So, 28, a lot is, it's not that long ago, but, you know, $1 in 2018 is not $1 in
Pre-COVID.
2025.
And that's under the assumption that some or any of the fees were waived in 2018. So I don't know how far back some of those, the fee structure actually went from there.
Yeah. I again would just lean on looking at similar municipalities in the region. If we are matching up roughly with them until we can really see otherwise, I think that's the safest route to go.
I agree.
And other municipalities are in that 5 to 6 range.
If that's,
Start.
if that's generally the norm, then on that stuff, that seems fair.
$500 to $600 for a violation? Was that, did I
A
hear that?
violation fee.
For a base fee.
For a base, that's the base. And then it compounds.
What other
Yeah,
communities
I
are you
think
comparing
half
that
of
As
to?
I said, we're not.
Hamilton,
That's the county seat, we can't do that.
We're not those communities.
No, well, no, and we're not saying that the 500, what we're providing is that's a number that we're seeing. It doesn't, I'm not saying it has to be 500, it can be 350.
Yeah.
It can be a moderate increase in between. What we're providing is regionally what you're seeing. And it doesn't necessarily say that Middletown has to match the region 100%. It can still have some sort of middle ground.
Sure, cause I think increase is definitely needed, I mean.
Sure.
I'm not advocating to
But-
start at 600 or I'm just laying out the
It's just-
facts.
I just feel uncomfortable with that high
And
amount.
It's
Yeah, I
a
agree.
lot.
The 600 is on the higher end of the starting violation.
Plus, you look at Butler County, no offense, and most, the developing areas they can afford that.
Yeah.
But then you come back to us and, even though they're wrong, I'm gonna be honest, they're wrong, but we have to think what's affordable. I wanna collect money. I wanna keep people in their homes and not to where they're facing fines, even though they should know better. I mean, let's just be honest, they do. And we do have a lot of offenders, but we can't, I don't wanna punish everyone because of those people, even though we know they're gonna continue. So we have to find a middle ground, cause we are different than what our region represents.
So here's an idea, maybe increase the rate of graduation, perhaps, start low, and then as those rack up, it gets, I don't wanna say exponential, definitely not exponential, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like,
So
Oh,
so
yeah.
maybe bump it to 250 and then the second one is
It's, yes.
So can-
700.
Just to
600,
put this into
something.
more
Yeah.
perspective, can we maybe get, like, as we're thinking about this, I mean, what type of because here's the thing for some of these things, if this is for like a $20,000 project, they're already putting the money into a $500
It's
fee.
nothing.
It's nothing, but like, if it is a smaller, so can you put it in perspective here? So this is for like anything? Like, what are we talking here?
It's for any violation.
Any violation.
So, do we think it
But
might
under
be
the,
worth?
under the discretion, the city manager has the discretion to, or no, that's for fees, never mind,
Yeah,
never
this
mind.
is- that's
Sorry, AJ.
civil penalties.
Well, I was gonna say, borrowing, sorry, I don't remember your term, but umbrellaing these types of violations, and then depending on what the type of violation is, then maybe a higher starting fee or accelerated, graduating fee process, just so that there's teeth, but there's grace.
I mean, so some of this too, I think it's either this or, I mean, a lot of the cases it's because they didn't get a permit as part of this. Generally, is that what we're talking, or is it?
Yeah.
Because there's a fee
yes.
for a permit too. So they're gonna have to, if they were gonna be doing this thing to begin with, they're gonna have to pay for that if that's the type of situation.
Again, I'm gonna echo, the pre-violation letter, we give 20 days to be in compliance. And so that's your grace period, that's your, hey, you might have forgotten to get your permit, come get your permit.
Yeah, in which case they have time to.
Okay,
use
so
that.
20 days passes, they don't want to. Then we issue the formal notice of violation, which we are then bound by technically 20 days, now is it 21, is it 6 months when staff maybe has time to get out there and get pictures? I'm guilty of that, yes. So then they have that time period between the formal inspection pictures taken to then be in compliance. If they are not in compliance, here's your fine. I guess where I am struggling with this conversation is I am not understanding why it is hard for a property owner who put up a fence without getting a permit to come in and get their permit
Yeah, that would solve it.
within 40 days.
And that's gonna,
okay, I
either
see
way,
that.
yeah,
That
either they're gonna
changes
have to
my
pay for the
code.
permit, or they're gonna have to do this, and also,
I'm okay with
if
that.
you already paid, you're
But-
paying like 12 grand for a fence.
But
If you can't fork over a couple of hundred more, I don't, you probably couldn't have afforded the fence.
Maybe that initial penalty fee is high. Maybe $350 is what the commission's comfortable with, and then you double it for your second.
Yes.
I've seen people
I
have
like that.
a roof tear off and re-roof on a holiday weekend, just so they wouldn't get caught.
I didn't hear that.
I could pay for that.
It sounds to me then.
But you must
know some people to get that.
Who is that, by the way?
If there's any disagreement, please voice it. We all recognize there needs to be fees, needs to be raised. I think I would be in agreement with this. We need to look at the surrounding area while recognizing that with the current state of Middletown, if we're being fully honest with some of the other ones, we may be on the lower end of what people can afford right now. And so if we're making recommendations, maybe they're raised, but not necessarily having to match precisely. They can be a little bit lower than some of those other places.
The fees or the civil penalties?
Penalties.
Yes,
Yes.
correct.
I like that one.
So then what?
Another,
Penalties should always be.
I know it's getting a little bit late, but another idea maybe to consider is maybe you break down what those penalties look like by a category. Because part of the other thing too, and you know, again, we really try to hear our community's concerns. We really try to be as business friendly as possible, right? You know, the last thing I wanna do is start running businesses out of town. But when it is a chemical cleaning company in a business zoning district, or the pig farmer in an R4, you know, those, while wild examples, you know, I think anyone can think of a neighborhood that might have a former gas station that's in an R4 now. It's no longer a functioning business, but adjunct or out-of-state property landlord is now using it as a truck stop or just like a parking, you know, area. Part of the use of these violations too is to make sure the community's putting our best foot forward, and that what our zoning, the teeth that are in there are trying to help, you know, preserve the community's engagement, making sure that, you know, beautification efforts, making sure our communities are respectful and the citizens are happy, right? So, just something to consider.
I agree. I don't know, just coming from my perspective, I feel like those beautification efforts, they preferably need to be coming from a grassroots community-led perspective, not imposed, but like, you know, I'm working with this sort of, you know, I'm on this board because, you know, I want to help kind of mediate, you know, those two halves of how to manage the city, right? But, yeah, I don't know, I think that it would probably be quite the project, but like if we can categorize violations and then, you know, come up with a way to different types of violations, we have a different, you know, penalty, you know, structure for those. I think that would probably help cut to the heart of the issue, because I feel like we've got a couple perspectives here that are kind of talking past each other, and we're talking past each other because there's not like a good enough framework to really frame the conversation, right? We're talking about penalties and peas. I can't talk right now, but you know what I'm trying to say. That like, there just needs to be maybe a little bit more to go off of rather than talking so broadly, you know? So
Yeah, that could
maybe
be
worth
included.
something looking into.
And then after the recommendation, I think that's wise.
Well, with that, this is not the only opportunity that you'll be able to talk with us through this code update. So I want to point to a couple of dates. Brent already mentioned these are tentative. We've penciled them on our end, and we've booked flights, but they can certainly move if needed. But just for your information, here's what we have in store for you coming up. On January 22nd, tentatively scheduled to be in here again to go over each of your zoning districts and then each of the allowable land uses within those districts. So that's going to be probably a pretty robust conversation. On then April 23rd, we're going to bring the third part, the last part of the update, which is looking at all of the standards for general and specific land uses. So landscaping, signage, and then all of the all of the standards for specific types of land uses. And then we will be presenting to the local interest groups at the end of this project, once we have a complete draft of a code ready. We'll be presenting that to some local interest groups. Those groups have still yet to be determined. If you have any suggestions, please pass them along to city staff. And then we have our third and I guess the fourth final study session with the Planning Commission in July, in which we will bring the entirety of the code before you. It will essentially be a follow-up to the 3 previous study sessions, where you get to look at it one more time before we roll it out for public review and bring it to the city council.
Cool.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you all for coming out.
Do you
Rest
want-
assured, when
Any
everyone comes
comments on
around, I have a
these?
lot to
Yes.
say about landscape.
If you guys have,
Perfect.
Word documents where you've made your own comments in these 4 chapters, please send them to me. I will get them over to our consultants.
Do we have any other order new business? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So moved.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm glad that everybody was